Chapter 2147. The white dragon had just woken up not long ago. It was still a remnant soul, and was very weak. Lan Kuan had the strength of the seventh layer of the crossing calamity realm. He subconsciously spat out a cloud of dark north Xianbing. How could the white dragon resist it? The white dragon was sealed by the dark north Xianbing, and floated on the lake. It couldn't break the seal by itself, so it had to ask Ji Tianxing for help. It said with a voice transmission, "Master, the Kuan you found seems to have a tendency to be violent. It's the first time I met it, and it welcomed me in such a special way." The white dragon's tone was quite depressed, but it could not hide the excitement in its heart. Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, "You are too impatient." At this time, Lan Kuan flew from the bottom of the lake to Ji Tianxing and nodded to him. Master, why are you here? Are you here to visit me?" Lan Kuan blinked its huge eyes and looked at Ji Tianxing with bright eyes. Obviously, it was too bored to sleep alone in the big lake. It would be happy and grateful that Ji Tianxing could come to see it and talk to it. "And I came to see how you are doing." Ji Tianxing nodded and looked at it seriously. He criticized, "Lan Kuan, I taught you the sky-swallowing technique, which is the most precious king-level technique in the world. You don't know how to cherish it and don't meditate and cultivate. You actually sleep at the bottom of the lake. I am very disappointed." Seeing that he was angry, Lan Kuan lowered his head in frustration and said in a low voice, "Master, I fought with the demon army on the battlefield before and spent a lot of energy." At this time, a block of ice the size of a house flew over. The white dragon's voice came out from it, and it quickly pleaded for Lan Kuan. "Master, don't be too harsh on Lan Kuan. It is still young, and it has suffered a lot of injuries in the previous battle. Look at the scars on its body. And why is it a little ugly? It's different from what I imagined." At first, White Dragon was still pleading for Lan Kuan, but halfway through his words, after carefully sizing up Lan Kuan, he suddenly showed a look of disdain. When Ji Tianxing saw that it was still sealed by the Xianbing, he waved his hand and released a stream of starfire to disperse the Xianbing. With the seal removed, the white dragon regained its freedom and circled twice in the air. Lan Kuan also turned his head to look at it, his eyes widening in surprise. "Master, this little white snake. Who is it?" Before Ji Tianxing could say anything, White Dragon suddenly became unhappy. "Hey, fathead fish, who are you calling little white snake? Look at your big eyes. Why are your eyesight so bad? Did the water get in? I'm clearly a dragon, a majestic and mighty white dragon. How can you mistake me for a snake?" The white dragon flew under Lan Kuan's nose and showed him his dragon-shaped body with an indignant expression. Lan Kuan looked at him blankly, blinked his eyes blankly, and muttered to himself, "But how can there be such a small dragon? Even an ordinary snake is bigger than you." After that, he didn't care about White Dragon's reaction. He stared at Ji Tianxing with disappointment and asked, "Master, before you said that you would find a partner for me, a wise and carefree white dragon. Could it be this little snake?" Ji Tianxing showed a smile and nodded with a kind face. "Yes, it's him. However, Lan Kuan, don't worry, White Dragon has just woken up, and now is the weakest time, so he doesn't look good. When his soul recovers, he can become a white dragon soaring in the 9 heavens. Moreover, he is a divine monarch who has dominated the galaxy, the strongest expert under my master. It's a great blessing for you to be able to follow him." After listening to his words, Lan Kuan shook his huge head again and said reluctantly, "Master, I don't want this partner. It's too small, too ugly, not like a divine dragon at all." White Dragon was so angry that his beard was flying, and he kept poking Lan Kuan's eyes with his tail. "Fathead fish, I don't think you're ugly, but you dare to dislike me? To be honest, if I was at my peak, such a weak fish like you could only be roasted by me." Lan Kuan stared at White Dragon and exclaimed in disbelief, "You not only look down on me, but also want to kill me?" White Dragon shook his head and said with a smile, "Not to kill you, to eat you." As soon as he finished speaking, Lan Kuan opened his mouth and spat out a cold, dazzling light. Bang! With another muffled sound, White Dragon was blasted out again, and turned into a piece of ice that fell into the lake. Ji Tianxing sighed helplessly, waved his hand to shoot out a starlight, picked up the ice, and removed the Xianbing seal. Seeing that White Dragon and Lan Kuan were about to argue again, he shouted with a dignified face, "Shut up!" White Dragon and Lan Kuan immediately shut their mouths and did not dare to act rashly. Ji Tianqing said earnestly, "Right now all of you are in your weakest state, and also in your most miserable state. But in the future, you will definitely become a supreme Dao powerhouse and roam the world. I hope that you two can get along well, help each other, and grow up as soon as possible. Master's time is very tight, and I don't have the mood to let you two play. You two can be alone for a while. Master will leave Tianzhu Mountain tomorrow and go to Tianzhu God Nation." After saying that, Ji Tianqing turned and was about to leave. Lan Kuan was silent, but he did not have the intention to object. White Dragon thought for a moment, and quickly followed Ji Tianqing, and asked, "Master, why are you going to Tianzhu God Nation? Is that old thing Tianzhu still alive?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "It's only been 1,000 years, Tianzhu is still alive and ambitious. However, Master will not meet him when I go to Tianzhu God Nation this time. Master has other things to do." White Dragon said without hesitation, "Master, I don't want to stay in Tianzhu Mountain. Please take me with you." Ji Tianqing glanced at it and chuckled. "You will cause trouble wherever you go. Master is not willing to take you. You should stay in Tianzhu Mountain and cultivate." White Dragon quickly wrapped around his arm and begged, "Master, I am now a remnant soul. How can I cultivate? Even if I want to recover my strength, I have to devour souls. Why don't you bring your disciple along? It's too boring to stay in Tianzhu Mountain." Ji Tianqing said playfully, "You don't want to stay in Tianzhu Mountain. Are you afraid of being bored? Or afraid that Huang Long will make fun of you?" "Humph! How dare junior brother Huang Long make fun of me?" White Dragon snorted, and continued to beg, "Master, take me with you. I promise I will not cause trouble for you. Moreover, Fathead Fish has been cultivating in the sword world. I can accompany it and cultivate a relationship with it." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, and then nodded in agreement. "Okay, Master can promise you. But you have to be honest and coordinate with Lan Kuan as soon as possible." Seeing that he finally agreed, White Dragon immediately smiled and bowed to thank him. Chapter 2148. Ji Tianqing returned to the secret room and kept the burial of Heaven sword. He did not care how Bai Long and Lan Kuan would interact, or if they could maintain a peaceful relationship. He believed that Bai Long would be able to convince Lan Kuan with his glib tongue. Not long after, a guard came to the secret room to report the news. "Young Master Ji, the great deity wishes to see you. Bring him to the study room and wait. I will be there soon." Ji Tianqing replied and walked out of the secret room. When he rushed to the study room, Huanglong Taoist was already waiting for him. "Greetings, Master." Seeing Ji Tianqing enter the study room, Huanglong Taoist quickly came forward and bowed respectfully. You may rise." Ji Tianqing nodded and walked to the study table. He sat down and looked at Huanglong Taoist with a smile. "I have not seen you for a year and you have made a breakthrough in your strength." Huanglong Taoist quickly cupped his hands and bowed. He answered truthfully, "Master, I have been in the rank 5 martial sage realm for 200 years. With your guidance, I made a breakthrough. I am not talented and this small improvement is not worth mentioning. Master, you have recovered to the martial sage realm in such a short period of time. This is unbelievable. Furthermore, when you broke through to the martial sage realm, you caused the golden light to fill the sky and the 9 dragons to illuminate the world. This news has spread throughout the mainland. When I heard this news, I was shocked and excited." Ji Tianqing nodded and said sincerely, "When I returned, I thought that after I broke through to the martial sage realm, I would stay in the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain for a long period of time and plan for the development of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain. I wanted to restore the glory of the past as soon as possible. However, I am currently tied up with worldly affairs. There are too many things that I have yet to finish. I really can't leave." Huanglong Taoist immediately understood what he meant and said solemnly, "Master, please do not worry. I will guard the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain and do my best to rebuild the Holy Land and restore it to its former glory. Master, you are a god and have many important things to do. You can do them with peace of mind." With me guarding the pillar of heaven's mountain, you do not have to worry. Yes. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a gratified expression, "It's best that you can understand Master's meaning. I've seen it before and there are many changes to the pillar of heaven's mountains. It seems that you've been working hard." Huanglong Daoist did not dare to claim credit for himself. He hurriedly bowed and said, "It is my duty to share Shizuan's burden." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and asked, "Briefly explain the current situation." Huanglong Daoist organized his thoughts and reported seriously, "Reporting to Master, our sect has recovered some of its vitality and has the foundation and power of a first-rate sect. Currently he had 8,000 disciples, 2,000 of which were disciples and 6,000 servants. Within the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, there were 9 sects, 18 factions, more than 400 cities and villages, and close to 500 million warriors and civilians. Within the Holy City, the 18 palaces and the 36 halls all had their disciples staying in them. The Spirit Beast Garden, Spirit Herb Garden, and Artifact Forging Workshop were all open to the public. Master, you've repeatedly created miracles and created a shocking legend of invincibility. This has also made the Pillar of Heaven's mountains more and more famous. Not only have the people under the Pillar of Heaven's mountains submitted, but many warriors and civilians from the 3 divine kingdoms have also moved to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. All in all, our sect is currently thriving and the situation is great. We're not far from recovering to our peak." Ji Tianqing nodded and instructed, "You have to send people to investigate the civilians and warriors from the 3 divine kingdoms, especially the people from the Heaven and Divine Kingdom. Do not let any spies in." "Disciple understands and has always done so," Huanglong Daoist replied. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while. He asked again, "Oh right, the cultivation resources for the disciples have always been doubled. The cultivation resources that Master left behind should be used up soon, right?" This. Huanglong Daoist hesitated for a while before answering truthfully. "Reporting to Master, the cultivation resources that Master left behind, in addition to our sect's inventory, have been used up long ago. Although Disciple has thought of ways to open up new mines and plant spirit herbs, the results are too slow. However, a few months ago, when you were leading the army from the Luoshui Divine Kingdom, the Luoshui Divine Kingdom sent a large number of cultivation resources. Because of this, our sect was able to recover." "So that's how it is." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, a complicated look flashed in his eyes. Then he took out a ring from his spatial ring and handed it to Huanglong Daoist. "When Master returned to the Luoshui Divine Kingdom, Granny Long gave me this ring, saying that it was a reward from the Luoshui Martial God. Master has already checked it. There are mountains of spirit stones, spirit pills, magic treasures, talismans, and so on. The value is over 1 billion. Master has kept some rare treasures for my own use. As for the ordinary spirit stones, spirit pills, and other resources, use them to enrich our sect's treasury." Huanglong Daoist was shocked and said in disbelief, "Master, the Luoshui Divine Kingdom sent over 400 million cultivation resources a few months ago. And now they're giving you 1 billion cultivation resources? Isn't that Luoshui Martial God too generous? Disciple feels that this matter is fishy. Could it be that the Luoshui Martial God already knows your true identity?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a solemn expression, "She should have guessed Master's identity a long time ago. Some rumors and news in the recent 2 years made her even more certain. The reason why she did this is to help us rebuild the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. It can be considered as returning a favor to Master." "So that's how it is." Huanglong Daoist was enlightened and said with a gratified expression, "For the past 1,000 years, only the Luoshui Divine Kingdom has secretly taken care of our sect. Disciple knows this in his heart. Now that Master has returned, the Luoshui Divine Kingdom will definitely be our sect's most reliable ally." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said, "Master will go to the Heaven and Divine Kingdom tomorrow. Guard the Pillar of Heaven's mountains well, and be careful. If you encounter any trouble, send a message to Master, or ask the Luoshui Divine Kingdom for help." Disciple understands. Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and bowed. Ji Tianqing reminded him a few more words before getting up and leaving. After returning to his residence, he circulated his qi and adjusted his breathing for a few hours. When the sky brightened, he quietly left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and flew to the Heaven End Divine Kingdom. This time he didn't bring Qianyu and the Black Dragon with him, only the Blue Koan and the White Dragon. On the way, he had nothing to do, so he used his divine sense to check the situation in the sword world. It was fine if he didn't see it, but when he saw it he was shocked. The White Dragon was actually sitting on the Blue Koan's head, flying over thousands of mountains and rivers, rushing to Peaceful Earth City. After the two of them arrived at Peaceful Earth City, they didn't harm the Earth Spirit race's dwarves. They only clamored in the sky, asking the Xitigarbha divine armor to come out. The Xitigarbha divine armor had been sleeping in the underground mine. After being awakened, it angrily flew into the sky and confronted the Blue Koan. The White Dragon then instigated the Blue Koan to lure the Xitigarbha divine armor to a remote mountain to teach it a lesson. Chapter 2149. Ji Tianxing was too lazy to care about White Dragon bringing Lan Kuan to cause trouble. Anyway, he knew that White Dragon would not harm the people of the Earth Spirit race. Even that Xitigarbha divine armor would at most be beaten up. There would not be any future trouble. Ji Tianxing retracted his divine sense and continued to rush to Heaven End God Nation. Before leaving, he had already read the jade slip given by Granny Long. It recorded the matters of the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. The previous Divine Martial Sacred Assemblies were held on the Void Platform. The Void Platform was a mysterious space outside of this world. In the endless void, the vast stars could be seen clearly. The entrance to the Void Platform was in Heaven End God Nation Sky City. Sky City was in the center of Heaven End God Nation. Thousands of miles away was the famous Heaven End Mountain. Heaven End Mountain was the sacred martial ground of Heaven End God Nation. It was also Heaven End Martial God's training ground. Its status was equal to God Sealing Mountain and God Luo Mountain. Sky City was the closest city to Heaven End Mountain. It had a history of 3,000 years. The ancient city was majestic and vast. The city walls were tall and towering. It covered an area of 300 miles and could accommodate millions of martial artists and civilians. Since ancient times, Sky City had always been prosperous. It gathered martial artists from all over the world. The several empires of Heaven End God Nation had to pass through Sky City. As early as 1,000 years ago, Kenshin had been to Heaven End God Nation and passed by Sky City. But he did not stay in the city at that time, so he did not have any impression of Sky City. 6 days later, Ji Tianxing arrived at Sky City as scheduled. It was noon and the sky was a little dark. Scattered gray clouds floated in the sky. The dim sunlight could not penetrate the clouds. Occasionally, a bit of light would shine through the gaps. A few hundred miles away, Ji Tianxing saw a dark brown majestic city on the ground in front of him. The city was surrounded by dark green plains. It was covered with grass and forests. 1,000 miles away were mountains. Arriving near the sky-gazing city, Ji Tianxing observed the ancient city from a close distance. He could feel an ancient and vigorous aura. The towering city walls were hundreds of meters tall and stretched for hundreds of miles, surrounding and protecting the entire Wangtian city. The city was filled with rows upon rows of palaces and pavilions. All kinds of houses and buildings of different styles were scattered in all directions. The wide streets and alleys were bustling with activity. Most of them were armed with swords and sabers. Their eyes were bright, and their bodies exuded a fierce or powerful aura. Even the peddlers and pawns peddling their wares on the streets were all powerful. None of them were ordinary people. Even though they were still far away, they could already hear the clamor and clamor. Ji Tianxing came to the east gate and followed the bustling crowd into sky-gazing city. There were close to 100 guards on both sides of the city gate. They were all dressed in black cold iron armor and held long spears that flickered with cold light. Their auras were cold and austere. However, the guards did not check the people who entered and left the city. It was probably because of the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly that the number of martial artists entering and leaving Sky City had increased by several times in the past few days. Although only a few people were qualified to participate in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, those people would bring a large group of disciples, followers, and guards with them. Very few people came alone like Ji Tianxing. Moreover, there were countless martial artists who came to Sky City just to watch the show. It was also good to be able to appreciate the elegance of the young martial saints. After entering Sky City, Ji Tianxing walked calmly to the center of the city and looked around calmly. At this moment, a series of shouts came from behind him. "Look, it's the honor guard of Marshal Saint Qingshan. Everyone get out of the way. Marshal Saint Qingshan has arrived. Don't block the way. Everyone get to the side of the road. If you offend Marshal Saint Qingshan, be careful of your heads." As the noisy shouts sounded, the martial artists and people beside Ji Tianxing all retreated to the sides of the road. Ji Tianxing turned his head and saw a guard of honor of more than 100 people passing through the city gate in a majestic manner. They were walking over in a dignified manner. The guards in the guard of honor were all wearing the Jin family's robes and holding halberds. Their eyes were as sharp as lightning. At first glance, one could tell that they were all powerful experts. 18 young guards were leading 6 celestial horses that were as red as fire, pulling a dazzling carriage. Around the carriage, there were more than a dozen young and beautiful maids in green clothes. All of them were holding swords and had a cold temperament. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, "Marshal Saint Qingshan? I've never heard of him before. He should be a young expert who rose in the last few hundred years. There seems to be a record of this person in the jade slip that Granny Long gave me. This person seems to be the Holy Emperor of the Qingshan Empire under the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation. He's the youngest martial saint. No wonder he's so arrogant." At this moment, a white-haired old man walked out from the crowd and said to Ji Tianxing anxiously, "Young man, don't just stand there. Didn't you see the guard of honor of Marshal Saint Qingshan? You're in the middle of the road. If you anger Marshal Saint Qingshan, you'll have to bear the consequences." Ji Tianxing glanced at the white-haired old man. Seeing the anxiety and worry in his eyes, he nodded with a smile and said, "Thank you for the reminder." After saying that, he followed the white-haired old man to the side of the road and stood in the crowd. The people on both sides of the road all kept quiet. They looked at the guard of honor with reverence, not daring to make a noise. After the guard of honor of Marshal Saint Qingshan passed by, the crowd showed a relieved expression. Soon after, the crowd began to discuss. Why did Marshal Saint Qingshan arrive early? Logically speaking, he should be very close to Wangtian City. Maybe there's a reason. How would we know? In the last 200 years, Marshal Saint Qingshan has been in the top 10 for 4 consecutive Shenwu Sacred Assemblies. In the last Sacred Assembly, he even ranked 4th. He's really famous. I hope that in this Shenwu Sacred Assembly, Marshal Saint Qingshan can enter the top 3. The Honorable 4th Divine Son has been ranked 1st for 10 consecutive Sacred Assemblies. If Marshal Saint Qingshan can also enter the top 3, then our Tianjua Divine Nation can occupy 2 of the top 3 positions, completely suppressing the Taihao and Luoshui Divine Nations. Ha ha ha, if that's the case, the other 2 Divine Nations will lose face. I'm really looking forward to it. Ji Tianxing stood in the crowd, silently listening to the crowd's discussion. His expression did not change. Not long after, the warriors and the people on both sides of the road dispersed. Ji Tianxing also turned and left, continuing to rush to the center of the city. He had calculated the time. The Shenwu Sacred Assembly would be held the day after tomorrow. He arrived at Wangtian City 2 days in advance. He had to find a place to stay in the city and wait patiently. 2 hours later, he walked to the center of the city. Not far from the city square, he found an inn to stay in. This inn, called Donglai, occupied the entire palace. The decoration was very magnificent. Chapter 2150. Not only was the East Inn luxurious, but its defense was also very tight. There were a large number of guards outside the inn, and many defensive arrays were set up inside the inn. Even the bedrooms were separated by a formation that could isolate sound and divine sense from probing. Although the price of staying in the inn was very expensive, there were still many martial arts experts who stayed in the inn. After all, the experts who came from all over the world did not care about spiritual stones. They needed a quiet environment. Ji Tianxing stayed on the 5th floor of the inn, in a simple and elegant bedroom. This bedroom not only had a bedroom, living room, and study room, but also a secret room for cultivation. Ji Tianqing was satisfied with this. After staying in the room, he entered the secret room and closed his eyes to meditate. After traveling for half a month, he was indeed tired. Just before the Divine Martial Sage Assembly, he could rest in the inn for 2 days and recover to his peak state as soon as possible, so that he could face the upcoming challenge. However, after meditating for 2 hours, Ji Tianqing frowned. He always felt as if there was a pair of eyes hiding in the dark, staring at him. Whenever he vaguely felt a sense of vigilance. After reaching the martial sage realm, his perception had become stronger and sharper. Even if someone cursed him from 100 miles away, he could still sense it. Strange, this is the first time I came to Wangtian City. There are no enemies here, and I am not ostentatious. Who would be spying on me? This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. Puzzled, he quietly released his divine senses and extended them in all directions. Although there were many arrays in the inn, they could not block his divine senses. Soon, his divine senses covered the entire palace and he detected hundreds of different auras. The various scenes in the inn appeared clearly in his mind. In the hall on the first floor, the shopkeeper stood behind the tall counter, fiddling with the abacus and looking at the account book. More than 10 guards guarded the door. There were also 2 groups of travel-worn martial artists who were asking the waiter if there was a room. In the hundreds of rooms on the 2nd to 5th floor, there were martial artists from all over the world. Most of them were from the human tribe, but there were a few from the foreign tribe. Most of the people were in groups of 3 or 5, but there were also a few who were alone like him. However, 2 groups of people caught Ji Tianqing's attention. A group of people was staying in the A-ranked VIP room on the 3rd floor. It was a young man with a graceful bearing. He was dressed luxuriously and had a dignified appearance. Inside and outside the room, there were 8 maids and more than 30 guards and attendants. All of them were extremely respectful. Most importantly, the young man's aura had reached the martial sage realm. The other group of people lived on the 4th floor. They lived in ordinary rooms with only 6 people. The leader was a tall and sturdy man. He wore a purple robe and a dark golden cape. His entire body exuded a dignified and domineering aura. This person was also a martial sage, and his body contained the aura of wind and thunder. The 5 people who traveled with him all had the strength of the tribulation realm. And they all wore the same white robes. They looked like fellow disciples. A tiny East arrival and actually has 2 martial saints. It seems that the influence of the Divine Martial Sage Assembly should not be underestimated. It actually attracted all the martial sage experts of the continent here. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and muttered to himself. Then, he quietly moved his spiritual consciousness away and continued to explore the inn. After a while, he found a clue and found his target. At the entrance of the inn, there were 12 guards in armor and holding swords. They stood upright and guarded the door. 11 of the guards looked straight ahead and had a cold and dignified posture. Only a skinny guard stared at the entrance from time to time, and then looked at the stairs in the hall. Although he tried to hide it, he acted naturally when he looked around and did not attract attention. However, his subtle movements and expressions could not escape Ji Tianqing's eyes. Other than the guards at the entrance, there were also 2 young men in cotton clothes at the back door. They were using a wooden cart to pull a few buckets and had been staying at the back door. On the surface, they looked like the workers of the inn who were working. But in reality, they had been staring at the back door, carefully observing everyone who came in and out. These 3 people were all sneaky and seemed very suspicious. However, Ji Tianqing did not take it to heart. What really made him vigilant was a black-robed man who lived on the 5th floor. This person was wearing a cloak and hid his true face, hiding in the room at the end of the corridor. He was wearing some kind of magic treasure that could hide and conceal his magic power aura. However, he was secretly using a diamond-shaped crystal to monitor the movements of the entire floor. Ji Tianqing observed for a while, and found that this person's attention was mostly focused on his room. Moreover, this person was secretly releasing his spiritual consciousness to check the situation in his room. He really is coming for me. Although this guy used a secret technique to hide his spiritual consciousness, he is too naive. Did he think he could hide it from me? Ji Tianqing frowned slightly. A cold light flashed in his eyes. In the Tianju divine nation, other than martial god Tianju, there are only people from the Broken Sky Alliance who have a grudge with me. I wonder which faction these people belong to? Actually, he vaguely had an answer in his heart. Martial god Tianju wanted the mystery of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain's ascension, so he would naturally secretly deal with him. However, if martial god Tianju wanted to make a move, why would he send these shrimp soldiers and crab generals? His vision was too low. Therefore, the answer was obvious. Ji Tianxing ignored the people who were secretly monitoring him and continued to meditate in the secret room. However, his spiritual consciousness seemed to extend out faintly, keeping an eye on the movements of those people. For hours later, it was late at night. The bustling sky city gradually quieted down. East arrival and also fell into silence. Only the lights in each room were lit. At this moment, the black-robed man who lived at the end of the corridor on the 5th floor quietly left his room. As soon as he left the inn, the guard at the entrance of the hall and the 2 linen-clothed men at the back door also scattered and left. Ji Tianxing also ended his meditation, used the invisibility technique, and quietly flew out of the inn. He followed the black-robed man, passed through the dark night sky, and flew out of Sky City. The black-robed man was very cautious. He circled the city twice before leaving from the corner of the city wall. After leaving Wangtian City, he sped up and flew towards the west. After a short 15 minutes, he flew out 800 miles and arrived at a mountain peak that was thousands of feet tall. This mountain peak was very ordinary among the mountains and was not eye-catching. However, on the peak of the mountain, under the cover of many towering trees, there was an ancient and quiet manor. The black-robed man descended from the sky and landed outside the manor. He cautiously checked the surroundings, and seeing that no one was following him, he quietly entered the manor. The manor was pitch black and deathly silent. It looked as if no one lived here and had been abandoned for a long time. Chapter 2151. Ji Tianxing had used the Armillary Heaven secret technique and had already merged with heaven and earth. He quietly landed at the entrance of the manor and glanced at the plaque on the door. The plaque made of bluestone had long been modeled, and the words on it were also blurred. But Ji Tianxing could still recognize that it was the 3 words Chiefing Garden. Even though there was a large defensive formation that enveloped the entire manor, but he easily broke through the formation and entered Chiefing Garden. He knew the whereabouts of the black-robed man like the back of his hand. He passed through the garden and corridor without any obstruction, entered a green bamboo sea, and also entered the rockery. At the same time, in the depths of the manor, in a dimly lit secret room, the black-robed man respectfully knelt on the ground and was kowtowing. 10 steps in front of him, there was a throne made of green spirit jade, and a man in a purple robe sat on it. This person was tall and muscular, with a black cloak on his shoulders and a silver mask on his face. It was unknown what material the mask was made of, but it actually shone brightly in the darkness, as if there were stars flashing. The mask covered the black-robed man's face, only revealing a pair of long and sharp eyes. His black pupils were very deep, revealing calmness and wisdom. The masked man sat on the throne with his hands flat on his knees meditating. Seeing that the black-robed man had returned, he revealed a cold gaze and asked in a low and dignified voice, "Fuyu, how is the situation?" The black-robed man named Fuyu hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed, and said respectfully, "Reporting to Lord Baishao, since 6 days ago, I have sent people to guard the 4 city gates. Anyone who enters Sky-Gazing City cannot escape the eyes of this subordinate. Just this afternoon, that person finally came and entered Sky City from the East Gate." The masked man was Lord Baishao. Hearing Fuyu's words, his eyes flashed with a bright light, and he asked excitedly, "Oh, he finally came? Ha ha. I already expected that brat has always been arrogant, and will not remember the previous grudges. The Divine Martial Sacred Assembly is such a big event, he will definitely come. Fuyu, where is that person now? Did he bring any companions? Have you met anyone after entering Wangtian City?" Fuyu answered truthfully. That person did not bring any companions. He entered Sky-Gazing City alone, and has never met with anyone else. He is now staying at the East Arrival Inn. Bai Xiao nodded slightly as a cold smile flashed through his eyes. He said coldly, "That's good. It's not convenient for us to find him for revenge, but he has delivered himself to our doorstep. This time we'll make sure he doesn't return." Fu Yu also revealed a triumphant sneer as she added, "Although it's rumored that this brat broke through to the martial saint realm not long ago, he's still a martial saint." However, with Lord White Firmament personally taking action, it was naturally an easy task. This subordinate knows that Lord White Firmament and Lord Heavenly Slayer are both patrol envoys of our alliance. They are also fellow disciples of the same sect, and have always had a deep relationship. Very soon, Lord Bai Xiao will be able to kill that kid and avenge Lord Tianshang. He will also be able to comfort Lord Tianshang's soul in heaven. Hearing Fu Yu's words, Bai Xiao shook his head. A cold light flickered in his eyes as he said faintly, "No, Fu Yu, you are wrong. Heavenly Slayer and I are indeed from the same sect, but we don't have much of a deep friendship. The reason why I volunteered to carry out this mission is to complete the Alliance leader's instructions. After all, our alliance is the #1 martial alliance in the mainland, and we are deeply respected by millions of sects. He's just a brat, and he dares to go against our alliance. He even killed our branch leader and patrol envoys. If we don't get rid of this brat, what prestige will our alliance have in the future?" Fu Yu hurriedly cupped her fists and bowed. She said respectfully, "Lord White Firmament is right." Bai Xiao chuckled and continued, "Furthermore, our alliance spent half a year investigating that brat's background. It's said that he is the #1 god's disciple in the Luoshui Holy Kingdom. He also calls himself the #1 genius of the human race, and has created many legends. Previously, before he broke through to the martial saint realm, he was able to kill patrol envoys Tianshang. However, we don't know how he did it. However, his strength is definitely not ordinary and his methods are extraordinary. Now that he has broken through to the martial saint realm, he is like a tiger that has grown wings. His strength must be even more powerful. Our alliance has always acted swiftly and decisively. We will definitely not do anything that we are not confident in. Although I am conceited, I do not dare to be careless in this matter. Naturally, I will do my best." Hearing his words, Fu Yu was stunned. Her face was filled with doubt as she asked, "Lord White Firmament, what do you mean?" Bai Xiao smiled confidently and said calmly, "I have already mobilized 50 of our alliance's top powers to lie in ambush around Strange Maple Garden. They will be on standby at any time. Furthermore, our alliance leader has already come out of seclusion and decided to use this matter to establish our prestige in case the other martial forces look down on our alliance. Now our alliance leader is on his way and I believe that he will arrive soon. When that time comes, no matter how powerful that brat is, he will definitely die." Fu Yu was shocked and said in disbelief, "Lord White Firmament, that brat is very young and has just broken through to the martial saint realm. Is it worth our alliance mobilizing so many people?" "I think that Lord White Firmament and the 50 top powers will be enough to tear that brat into pieces. I didn't expect that even our alliance leader would be alerted and rush over personally." Bai Xiao nodded and said meaningfully, "Fu Yu, you are only a small branch leader. How can you guess what our alliance leader is thinking? So what if we mobilize so many people and make a mountain out of a molehill? The alliance leader has been in seclusion for more than 200 years, and has not shown himself. It is inevitable that the newly risen martial forces in the mainland will overstep their boundaries. The alliance leader wants to use this matter to establish his prestige and intimidate those forces who have ulterior motives. So that's how it is." Subordinate understands. Fu Yu came to a sudden realization and hurriedly bowed. Bai Xiao waved his hand and instructed, "All right, return to the inn and keep an eye on him. If there are any abnormalities, report to me immediately." Fu Yu quickly cupped her fists and bowed. Her voice was sonorous as she said, "I will do as you command. I will take my leave." With that, she turned and opened the door to the secret chamber, and was about to leave. However, just as she opened the stone door, her body froze on the spot. Her face under the cloak was filled with shock and astonishment as her eyes widened. This was because a young man in a white robe was standing at the door of the secret chamber, and was looking at her with a cold smile on his face. He I am right here. Why do you need to spy on me in the inn? Without a doubt, the person who had come was Ji Tianxing. Not only was Fuyu staring at him in shock, but even Bai Zhao's body shook and his eyes were filled with shock. In the next moment, Fuyu regained his senses and a murderous look appeared on his face. She shouted angrily, "Brat, you actually followed me here." Chapter 2152. As he spoke, Fuyu raised both his fists and punched towards Ji Tianxing's head. His fists emitted a dazzling golden light, and emitted a violent and fierce aura. Even a huge rock or a city wall would be shattered instantly, let alone a body of flesh and blood. However, Ji Tianxing did not take Fuyu seriously at all. A mocking sneer still hung on his face. He raised his right hand and casually slammed his palm towards Fuyu. Boom! With a dull explosion, Fuyu's fists exploded on the spot and a rain of blood splattered out. At the same time, Fuyu flew backwards with blood spurting out of his 7 orifices and crashed violently towards Bai Zhao. While he was still in midair, Fuyu's heart and soul had already been shattered. By the time he crashed in front of Bai Zhao, he had already lost all signs of life and turned into a corpse. Bai Zhao was indeed a patrol envoy and a martial saint. He could remain calm in the face of such a drastic change, and remained seated on his throne. With a cold look in his eyes, he reached out and caught Fuyu's corpse and threw it on the ground. His eyes were fixed on Ji Tianxing the entire time, and did not shift away at all. "Kid, I said that you were arrogant and conceited, but I underestimated you. I never thought that you would be so arrogant that you would sneak into wonderful Maple Garden to die." Bai Zhao glared sharply at Ji Tianxing and shouted in a cold tone. Ji Tianxing calmly stepped into the secret room and said with a cold smile, "I heard your conversation clearly. Since someone wants my life, then of course I have to personally come and see who it is that dares to act so recklessly." Bai Zhao was not in a hurry to attack and shouted in a dignified tone, "Kid, I really don't know if you're too conceited or too ignorant. You've offended the Broken Heaven Alliance, the #1 martial Dao faction in the continent. Apart from the 3 divine kingdoms, no one and no faction can fight against our alliance. You're the one who's tired of living if you're in such a hurry to die." Ji Tianxing glanced at him pitifully and laughed coldly. "Only a frog at the bottom of a well like you would praise the Broken Heaven Alliance to the heavens. In my eyes, the Heaven-Shattering Alliance is nothing but a motley crew. What is there to fear? You." Bai Zhao was so angry that his body trembled, and his eyes were covered with a layer of red. In his rage, his qi and blood almost flowed in the opposite direction, and he could not help but go berserk. He never thought that Ji Tianxing would actually be arrogant to such an extent that he did not even put the Heaven-Shattering Alliance in his eyes. Ji Tianxing wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He said in a playful tone, "You're stalling for time with me because you want to wait for those 50 tribulation transcending experts to arrive. This can only mean that your heart is filled with fear. You and I haven't even fought yet, and you've already lost." Bai Zhao immediately frowned, his eyes flashing with shame and indignation. But what Ji Tianxing said was the truth, so he couldn't refute it. Ji Tianxing continued, "I've always hated trouble, so tonight, I plan to make a clean break with the Heaven-Breaking Alliance. Aren't you delusional? Are you still hoping that those 50 experts will come and join forces with you to attack me? Since that's the case, then I'll wait for them to come, and then I'll destroy your delusions in front of you." Bai Zhao's eyes suddenly widened, revealing a look of shock. You bastard, you're really arrogant to the point of being lawless. You've underestimated those 50 elite experts. Even I wouldn't dare to be so careless. Kid, you're dead meat. I'll tear you to pieces." Ji Tianxing only sneered disdainfully, and did not reply. Soon in the night sky outside Cleaving Garden, there was a slight sound of something breaking through the air. Dozens of black shadows cut through the night sky, and entered the manor as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, those black shadows landed around the sea of bamboos, forming a circle. A total of 50 experts were wearing black outfits and cloaks, concealing their true appearances. They all held sabers, swords, and magic treasures in their hands, and their bodies emitted a fierce killing intent. Everyone moved in an orderly manner, and did not make any noise. 2 of the leaders were about to activate the array in the rockery to enter the secret underground chamber. At this moment, A golden light flashed in the rockery, and a white figure appeared out of thin air. Swoosh! The white-robed figure appeared in the night sky, and his body stood proudly on the rockery. He looked down at the black-robed men around him with an indifferent expression. "You're not slow. You've all arrived so quickly," he said in a calm tone, and a domineering aura spread out. The 50 experts around the sea of bamboos all focused their gazes on him, and they looked stunned. At the same time, a white light lit up in the rockery again. Swoosh! Bai Xiao flew out, and his body stood upright in the night sky, facing off against Ji Tianxing. The black-robed experts saw Bai Xiao appear, and they heaved a sigh of relief, and hurriedly bowed to greet him. "Greetings, Lord Bai Xiao." Bai Xiao's face was as cold as ice, and he ordered in a cold tone. "What are you waiting for? Kill that brat." The black-robed experts came back to their senses, and they hurriedly waved their swords and Dharma treasures, and used their unparalleled killing moves to besiege Ji Tianxing. Swoosh! 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 Suddenly, the light of swords and sabers lit up, dispelling the darkness in the night sky. Hundreds of spell lights and shadows poured down on Ji Tianxing like a flood from the sky. Ji Tianxing was surrounded and attacked by everyone, but he was not afraid at all. He formed a spell with both hands, and shouted in a dignified tone, "Sword Rain." In the blink of an eye, he formed 99 Dharma seals with both hands, and they condensed into a dazzling starlight that bloomed like a lotus. At the same time, in the distant sky, tens of thousands of cracks appeared in the sky. Tens of thousands of starlights lit up, and poured down like a torrential rain. In an instant, tens of thousands of starlight swords lit up the night sky, dispelling the boundless darkness. The area became as bright as day, and it was so bright that people could not open their eyes. Countless martial artists and civilians in Wangtian City were also awakened by the earth-shattering aura of the stars. Of course, before the starlight sword rain fell, the Dharma spells cast by many experts hit Ji Tianxing first. Bang! 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 A series of muffled sounds burst out, like muffled thunder, continuous and unending. The colorful brilliance of the Dharma spells completely drowned Ji Tianxing. However, he was wrapped in a layer of golden light, and he stood in the night sky like a towering mountain, motionless. No matter how many Dharma spells bombarded him, he was not injured at all, and he did not even take half a step back. His flesh and skin were far tougher than a divine artifact, so how could those tribulation stage experts hurt him? Such a scene caused Bai Xiao and the 50 black-clothed experts to reveal expressions of indescribable terror. They could not believe this result, and they wanted to use their ultimate skills to besiege Ji Tianxing again. But it was too late, and the monstrous sword rain finally fell. Swoosh! 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 The sharp and ear-piercing sound of something breaking through the air enveloped the entire mountain peak. Tens of thousands of starlight swords, with the power to destroy heaven and earth, drowned the entire Chiefing Garden. As the starlight bloomed like a mushroom cloud, a loud noise that shook the 9 heavens immediately sounded. Boom! 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 Chapter 2153. These 50 powerhouses in black were all at the 2nd to 4th level of the tribulation stage. They were all the elite powerhouses of the Broken Sky Alliance. Only a superforce like the Broken Sky Alliance could gather so many martial Dao powerhouses. However, under the bombardment of the sword rain, the powerhouses were as weak as paper and could not resist at all. If they joined forces and formed a defensive formation, they might have a chance to survive. However, it happened so suddenly that Bai Xiao and the powerhouses did not expect Ji Tianxing's strength to be so terrifying. The earth-shattering sound echoed in the night sky for a long time before it gradually dissipated. The dust and starlight that covered the sky could be clearly seen from thousands of miles away. It lasted for 100 breaths of time before it disappeared. When the night sky became clear again, Bai Xiao was stunned by the scene before him. He saw that the huge Chiefing Garden had turned into a mess of ruins. There were deep pits and dilapidated walls everywhere. Even the entire mountain peak had been blasted into pieces. The mountain was full of cracks and countless rocks had collapsed. The 50 powerhouses in black had all disappeared. Only the fragments of Dharma treasures and weapons scattered in the ruins, as well as some broken bones and strips of cloth, proved that they had once existed. Without a doubt, many of the powerhouses had been killed by the 10,000 swords. Even Bai Xiao himself was covered in blood and his robe was torn and tattered. Only the silver mask on his face was intact and shone with faint starlight. However, there was a trace of dark red blood at the corner of his mouth under the mask. When the 10,000 starlight swords came down, he was also enveloped by the sword rain. Even though he was a martial sage powerhouse, he could not block the power of the starlight swords, and his internal organs were injured on the spot. But he'd completely disregarded the pain in his body, and his eyes stared fixedly at the ruins while his mind was filled with terror since long ago. This is impossible. Impossible. There is no justice in this. Bai Xiao stared at Ji Tianxing with bloodshot eyes and roared to himself in a hoarse voice. Even though he had seen it with his own eyes, he could not accept this fact. He could not believe that a young man who had just broken through to the martial sage realm could have such destructive power. In the past, he had guessed and pondered many times. Ji Tianxing only had the strength of a tribulation transcendence realm cultivator. How could he kill Inspector Tian Chong? There must be something else going on. It was most likely that Inspector Tianchong had encountered some kind of danger and was already heavily injured. That was why he had died at the hands of Ji Tianxing. Before this, Bai Xiao had always believed this and was extremely certain. But now his views and thoughts had finally changed. He had no choice but to believe that such a monstrous talent like Ji Tianxing did indeed have the ability to kill Heavenly Slayer. Of course, there was also him. Ji Tianxing stood in the night sky, his robes as white as snow, untainted by even a speck of dust. He looked at Bai Xiao calmly and said in an indifferent tone, "These are the 50 experts you've prepared and arranged in advance? Now that they're all dead, it's time for you to go on your way. You can say your last words." Bai Xiao immediately trembled when he heard that. Grief and indignation flashed through his eyes. He glared angrily at Ji Tianxing, his hands holding two blazing white swords, his whole body bursting with an unyielding fighting spirit. "Ji Tianxing, you bastard, you've gone too far. No matter how powerful you are, you shouldn't humiliate the Broken Sky Alliance like this. The 100,000 martial Dao experts of our alliance will fight you to the death." Bai Xiao roared at the top of his lungs. His tone was extremely solemn, as though he was facing death with equanimity. Ji Tianxing shook his head gently and said with an indifferent expression, "You're just an inspector, not an arbitrary heaven. What right do you have to represent the Broken Sky Alliance? All right, you've said your last words. It's time for you to go on your way." As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing punched Bai Xiao with his left hand. His right hand formed a sword finger and slashed out a huge golden sword at him. Star-shattering fist. Sky-breaking sword. The huge golden fist shadow smashed toward Bai Xiao with the power to shatter everything. Bai Xiao's expression changed immediately. He quickly waved his swords and slashed out dozens of snow-white sword radiances, forming a huge sword net in front of him. Bam! The gigantic golden fist shadow struck the white light sword net with a loud bang, causing a deafening explosion. Instantly, the white sword net was smashed into pieces, scattering white light fragments all over the sky. The power of the golden fist shadow did not diminish. It hit Bai Xiao again. Bai Xiao was immediately sent flying, tumbling down the mountain. The great golden sword of light followed closely behind, slashing down from the sky towards Bai Xiao. The huge golden sword was about to hit his head, but he was still rolling in the night sky. In the next moment, he was about to be killed by the sword radiance. At this critical moment, Bai Xiao's body lit up with a dazzling white light, and he disappeared with a swoosh. He actually used his trump card at this critical moment. In an instant, he crossed a distance of 50 miles and appeared in the night sky far away. That sword that could split heaven and earth was dodged by him just like that. Boom. The huge sword slashed the mountain, creating an earth-shattering explosion. The mountain peak was already full of cracks and holes. After being slashed by the huge sword, it completely collapsed. For a moment, countless rocks and soil rolled on the wasteland, creating a huge rumbling sound and creating a huge cloud of dust. Bai Xiao saw this from afar. He was so shocked that his face turned pale, and cold sweat broke out on his back. Luckily, I mastered the white full fleeting time and dodged that sword strike. Otherwise, I would have most likely died. No. This bastard is too powerful. I'm afraid I'm no match for him. I can't stay here any longer. He muttered to himself and immediately made up his mind. He turned around and fled to the north. However, Ji Tianxing crossed a distance of 50 miles in one step, and appeared beside him with a swoosh, blocking his way. What? You're still thinking of escaping? Ji Tianxing looked at him coldly. Bai Xiao was embarrassed and angry. He felt a fire burning in his chest, almost bursting his body. He glared fiercely at Ji Tianxing and shouted angrily, Ji Tianxing, don't be too arrogant. This is the Sky City of the Heaven End Holy Nation, not the Luoshui Holy Nation. You can't do whatever you want here. Although Bai Xiao's tone was fierce, it was obviously a facade. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked playfully, I said I'll kill you, so I'll kill you. Do I need to pick a place? Bai Xiao was completely humiliated. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Ji Tianxing, don't forget that the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly is about to begin. Many martial sages have gathered in the Sky City. The commotion caused by our battle has already alarmed the Sky City. You dare to kill here. Aren't you afraid of the Heaven and Holy Nation's punishment? Ji Tianxing sneered contemptuously. You sent people to spy on me and even ambushed 50 experts to kill me. Didn't you think of the consequences? The Broken Sky Alliance dared to attack me. Why can't I fight back? Chapter 2154. Ji Tianxing's patience had run out. As soon as he finished his words, he struck out like lightning. Sky-piercing finger. He pinched his sword fingers with his right hand and pointed them at Bai Xiao. A blinding white light shot out, carrying the power to pierce through everything, and arrived in front of Bai Xiao. Bai Xiao's expression changed drastically. He instinctively waved his two swords in front of him. Clang! With a crisp sound, the two swords in his hands flashed with white light, and he was sent flying on the spot. Immediately after, the sky-piercing finger pierced through Bai Xiao's magical energy shield and pierced his chest. The purple robe he was wearing was instantly torn into pieces, revealing the black soft armor he was wearing. Although the soft armor was a sage-level magic treasure, and had extremely strong defensive power, it was still not enough. After the sky-piercing finger hit the black soft armor, it was unable to pierce through it and only left a dent. However, the powerful sky-piercing finger still pierced through the soft armor and hit Bai Xiao's heart. Puff! Bai Xiao's body shook and his face turned as pale as paper. He opened his mouth and spat out a jet of dark red blood. His body stiffened and his eyes widened like copper bells. His eyes were filled with fear and despair. Ji Tianxing's finger had actually managed to penetrate his soft armor and severely injure his heart meridian. His heart was shattered, his meridians were broken, his magic power and blood stopped flowing, and his physical body was almost destroyed. Bai Xiao simply couldn't understand how Ji Tianxing could use such a strange and unpredictable finger technique. Even if he was wearing a sage-level armor, he would not be able to do it. This was too horrifying. At the same time, Ji Tianxing shouted again, and raised his hand to shoot out a golden shadow. Sky-capturing dragon claw. A golden dragon claw the size of a mountain appeared out of thin air in the night sky, descending from the sky and enveloping the white sky. Bai Xiao felt the aura of death approaching, and his eyes were filled with fear. He had no doubt that once the golden dragon claw hit him, his physical body would be destroyed and his bones would be smashed into pieces. At that time, even his divine soul would fall into Ji Tianxing's hands. His fate was self-evident. However, at this critical moment, a clear and cold voice suddenly rang out in the night sky. Stop! Along with this cold shout, a sword light as bright as the stars and as bright as the moon attacked from afar. Shwa! 1,000 feet long sword projection instantly pierced through the night sky and struck the golden dragon's claw. With a muffled bang, the golden dragon claw was pierced through by the sword light. Countless cracks appeared on its surface, and countless fragments of golden light burst forth. The golden dragon claw crumbled, and Bai Xiao's life-threatening crisis disappeared on the spot. However, the impact of the collision between the dragon claw and the sword light formed a golden shockwave that ruthlessly blasted Bai Xiao. Boom! He was sent flying again. Blood spurted out from his 7 orifices, and cracks appeared on his body. He was already severely injured, and his body was on the verge of death. Once again he was hit by the shock wave. This time he couldn't escape. His heart was completely shattered. Shwa! His lifeless body fell from the night sky and fell powerlessly into the ruins. A dazzling white divine soul flew out from the corpse. It flew into the night sky in a panic, and turned around to escape. Although the sudden turn of events saved Bai Xiao's life, it also caused his physical body to be completely destroyed, leaving only his soul behind. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and turned his head to look in the direction of Wangtian City. He saw a silver-white moonlight speeding towards him at lightning speed. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, the white light arrived above the ruins and stopped in the night sky 1,000 feet away. After the white light dissipated, two figures appeared. The person in the lead was a young man in a silver-white long robe and a dark golden cloak with dragon patterns on it. This person was 8 feet tall and had a handsome appearance. He had sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes. He exuded a noble and majestic aura, although he looked like he was only in his 30s. However, Ji Tianqing could clearly sense that this person's strength was unfathomable. He was at least a rank 8 martial sage. The person who had released the sword Radiance and destroyed the golden dragon claw was also this young man in the silver robe. Behind the young man in the silver robe, there was a burly middle-aged man who was more than 2 meters tall. This person was wearing a bright silver armor and a dragon feather 9-star helmet. His square face was full of vicissitudes and domineering. His strength had reached the rank 7 martial sage realm. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at the two of them expressionlessly. He thought to himself, these two people are so powerful and are the top among the martial sages. I wonder where they are from. At that moment, Bai Xiao's divine soul saw the person who had come and quickly flew to the young man in the silver robe. Bai Xiao greets the eldest divine son. I am extremely grateful for your help. Bai Xiao expressed his gratitude to the young man in the silver robe through his divine soul. There was an obvious sense of relief in his tone. When Ji Tianqing heard Bai Xiao's voice, he raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, the eldest divine son. Could he be the eldest son of martial god Tianju? When he thought of this, he suddenly realized, I see. No wonder this person is so powerful despite his young age. At that moment, the eldest divine son looked at Bai Xiao's divine soul calmly and asked in a dignified tone, Bai Xiao, when I arrived at Wangtian City tonight, I saw the commotion outside the city and rushed over to check the situation. Tell me, what exactly is going on? Why was your physical body destroyed and only your divine soul left? The eldest divine son's expression and tone were very calm and gave a good impression. At first glance, one could tell that he was an elegant, knowledgeable, upright, and honorable young master who handled matters impartially. It was hard for one to feel disgusted by him. Bai Xiao was instantly filled with grief and indignation. He complained angrily, Eldest divine son, you must seek justice for me. That bastard is from the Luoshui Holy Kingdom. He killed our patrol envoy Tian Shan, branch leader Qin Haishan, and hundreds of elites. His hands are stained with blood. I heard that he was coming to participate in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, so I sent people to investigate in secret. I wanted to seek justice for my dead colleagues. Who knew that this person was so vicious and evil that he found Chiefing Garden by following the clues. After he appeared, he used extremely cruel methods and brutally killed all the guards of Strange Maple Garden. I was so angry that I confronted him and was severely injured. If it weren't for you, the eldest divine son, who came to save me in time, I would have been killed by him. Bai Xiao complained about Ji Tianqing's crimes in a tearful voice. His words were full of grievances and unwillingness. Those who heard it were moved, and those who heard it were sad. After the eldest divine son heard it, he couldn't help but frown and look coldly at Ji Tianqing. The middle-aged man behind him was also furious. He shouted in a dignified tone, "Boy, what's your name? Where are you from? How dare you start a massacre outside Wangtian City?" He was truly audacious and unscrupulous to the extreme. Chapter 2155. The middle-aged man in armor was obviously a person of high status. His aura was extremely strong. His stern words contained a frightening power. When his voice spread over a radius of 10 miles, Dozens of flowing lights flew over from the direction of Wuxia City. Whoosh, whoosh. In the blink of an eye, more than 30 flowing lights flew above the ruins and stopped in the night sky. In each stream of light, there were 2 or 3, or even 3 or 5 martial arts experts. Most of them had reached the martial sage realm, and their auras were extraordinary. A few experts who were only in the tribulation passing realm stood in the outer area and watched from afar. There were a few groups of powerful martial saints with high statuses standing closest to Ji Tianxing and the eldest divine son. Even those powerhouses cupped their hands and greeted the eldest divine son. Greetings, eldest son of God. A young man in a long green robe with his hair tied up in a bun and a golden feather crown stood closest to the eldest son of God. He cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. There were 4 attendants behind him. They were all young and handsome swordsmen. They wore the same white robe and carried ancient swords with cloud patterns on their backs. The eldest son of God nodded slightly and returned the greeting. Greetings, sacred Emperor Qingshan. There was no doubt that the young man in the long green robe was martial sage Qingshan. When Ji Tianxing entered Wuxia City, he had seen martial sage Qingshan's ceremonial procession, but he did not see his face. On the other side, 100 steps away from the eldest son of God, a white-haired elder with a ruddy complexion also cupped his hands and bowed to the eldest son of God. Greetings, Prince Yuanzhen, with my beloved disciple Chaoying. The elder was in a gray robe. His back was a little stooped and he looked ordinary. However, his strength was not to be underestimated. He had reached the 7th level martial sage realm, and was a leading figure in the martial world. Behind him was a young woman who looked to be about 30 years old. This woman was wearing a simple and elegant white long dress with a silver belt inlaid with jade around her waist. She wore a Taoist crown on her head, giving her a rather valiant look. Her figure was tall and slender, and her appearance was dignified and generous. Although she could not be considered a peerless beauty, her temperament was very outstanding, and she was still fresh in people's memories. She was the gray-robed elder's disciple Chaoying. Most importantly, she was one of the best among the young martial sages, and possessed the strength of a rank 4 martial sage. The eldest divine son cupped his hands at the gray-robed old man and said with a smile, Greetings, martial sage. I haven't seen Miss Xiaoying for decades. It seems like your strength has improved again. Chaoying hurriedly bowed to the eldest son of God, and revealed a graceful smile. She said in a clear voice, You're too kind, eldest son. As she spoke, she looked at the eldest divine son with eyes as bright as stars. There was a hint of undetectable admiration in her eyes. Immediately after, several other groups of experts also bowed and greeted the eldest divine prince. Ji Tianxing had been watching from the sidelines and gradually understood the situation. I've seen the jade slip that Granny Long gave me before, and it introduced this Yuanzhen. This Yuanzhen is the eldest son of martial god Tianju, and was born more than 1,600 years ago. He is the most talented among the many children of martial god Tianju. Not only was his talent outstanding, but he was also one of the most outstanding among the divine sons when it came to dealing with people and scheming means. He has reached the rank 8 martial sage realm at such a young age, and is known as the number 1 genius of heaven and divine kingdom. He is the most promising person to break through to the god realm. Martial god Tianju also thinks highly of him and nurtured him as his successor. Even the grandest divine martial sacred assembly was given to Yuanzhen to host. Now it seems that the information recorded by Granny Long is true. This Yuanzhen is indeed outstanding and knows how to win people's hearts. The various martial sages and forces are very respectful to him. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing could not help but glance at Yuanzhen and thought to himself, the divine martial sacred assembly is about to start. Yuanzhen and the various martial sages will gather in Sky City, but something like this happened tonight. I wonder how Yuanzhen will deal with it. On the surface, the Broken Sky Alliance was an independent martial arts organization, and did not serve any divine kingdom. But in reality, the Broken Sky Alliance has long become the lackey of heaven and divine kingdom. I think that Yuanzhen will not let this matter rest. He had long guessed the relationship between the Broken Sky Alliance and heaven and divine kingdom, and had already made plans. Soon all the tyrants had greeted Yuanzhen. Everyone began to ask Yuan Zhen what had happened here, and why did it cause such a huge battle. Yuan Zhen nodded slightly and pointed to the middle-aged man behind him and said to the crowd, "The Divine Martial Sacred Assembly is about to start, but something like this happened outside Sky City. I am deeply regretful and angry. As for what happened, I hope that Sir Qin, the commander of the Divine Guards, can explain it to everyone." Hearing his words, everyone's gaze fell on the middle-aged man. Some people recognized him and showed him respect. Some people who did not know him then realized his identity. He was the commander of the Divine Guards of Heaven and Divine Kingdom. He was Martial God Tianju's most trusted right-hand man, and was the commander of the 100,000 Divine Guards. It was rare to see him. Sir Qin stepped forward and cupped his fists at the surrounding forces. He said in a sonorous tone, "Everyone, His Highness and I have just arrived. Just now I've already asked Bai Xiao, and only then did I know what happened." Then he pointed to Ji Tianqing, who was not far away, and said in a dignified tone, "This person is from Luoshui Divine Kingdom, and is also a young martial saint who came to participate in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. However, he has a grudge with the Broken Sky Alliance, and has killed hundreds of Broken Sky Alliance's elites and a branch leader. He also murdered Inspector Tian Chong." Sir Qin repeated Bai Xiao's words word for word. When the forces heard this, they were instantly shocked and looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. Of course, the vast majority of people were gloating over his misfortune, and felt pity for him. In their eyes, this person did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. He dared to have a death grudge with the Broken Sky Alliance, and even dared to kill outside Sky City. He was simply tired of living. Tonight, First Divine Prince Yuan Zhen was present, and would definitely solve this matter. However, just as the crowd was discussing, Ji Tianqing opened his mouth to speak. He looked at Sir Qin expressionlessly and said in an indifferent tone, "Sir Qin is only repeating Bai Xiao's words. This is Bai Xiao's one-sided story, and it is not to be believed." Sir Qin frowned and asked with a gloomy face, "Bai Xiao's physical body was destroyed by you and only his divine soul was left. The 50 guards of Cleaving Garden were also killed by you and died without a complete corpse. Could it be that this matter is false? How could I have wronged you?" Ji Tianqing sneered with contempt and said, "Bai Xiao sent people to spy on me secretly and secretly gathered 50 tribulation stage experts to kill me and avenge Tian Chong. They were not as skilled as me and were killed on the spot after I saw through their scheme." Chapter 2156. Lord Qin was at a loss for words. His face was filled with anger as he shouted, "Brat, you're twisting words and forcing logic." Ji Tianqing glanced at him, then looked at Yuan Zhen with a faint smile and asked, "What's wrong? Lord Qin's words are reasonable, and I'm twisting words and forcing logic just because I refuted? Since Heaven's End God Nation is so unreasonable, what's the point of talking nonsense?" Lord Qin's face turned black as he glared at Ji Tianqing with a murderous glint in his eyes. "Brat, you're inverting right and wrong. You're the one who killed the guards of Strange Maple Garden, destroyed it, and severely injured Bai Xiao. This is obvious to all. No matter how you quibble, you can't deny it." Ji Tianqing sneered. "I'm new here and am not even familiar with Sky Gazing City. Why would I come to Strange Maple Garden? Isn't it because Bai Xiao plotted against me? Your so-called Strange Maple Garden guards are 50 Tribulation Realm powerhouses, and they're all elites of Heaven's End Alliance. Does Lord Qin think that Heaven's End Alliance is so powerful that Tribulation Realm powerhouses are only fit to be manor guards? Anyone with a brain would understand what's going on. But Lord Qin, you're biased towards Bai Xiao and put the blame on me. I think you're either stupid or have ulterior motives." Ji Tianqing scolded Lord Qin mercilessly in front of so many powerful people. Lord Qin was so angry that the veins on his face bulged, and his body emitted a cold murderous intent. "Brat! What a sharp tongue! Not only are you twisting right and wrong in front of everyone, but you also dare to insult me. You probably don't know my methods. Tonight, no matter how eloquent you are, it's useless. I'll make you plead guilty." As he spoke, Lord Qin's body lit up with a white light, and he was about to attack Ji Tianqing with a spell. Ji Tianqing sneered and said loudly, "Everyone saw it. They want to reason, so I'll reason with them. But Lord Qin thinks he's powerful, and can do whatever he wants in Heaven's End God Nation. Since he couldn't frame me, he's going to attack me in anger. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being impolite. If I accidentally kill you later, you only have yourself to blame. Don't blame me. As his voice fell, his entire body burst forth with soaring battle intent. His right hand pinched his sword fingers, and an incomparably fierce aura was brewing in his body. He was ready to launch a thunderous attack at any time. Seeing this scene, the surrounding tyrants were all shocked and astonished. Everyone's eyes were focused on Ji Tianxing. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Whispers and discussions also broke out in the crowd. Where did this kid come from? How dare he be so arrogant? Yes, he knows that Lord Qin is the inspector of the immortal guards, but he is not afraid at all. He even said that he would kill Lord Qin. How audacious. From what I can see, this person is still very young. He must have just broken through to the martial sage realm, and does not know how powerful Lord Qin is. Lord Qin is a veteran 7th stage realm martial saint. I'm afraid he'll be defeated in 2 or 3 moves. Lord Qin's position is high and powerful. Normal people don't dare to offend him. Moreover, the person standing beside Lord Qin is the eldest divine son, Yuan Zhen, the future master of Heaven Extinction Holy Kingdom. This kid is openly provoking Lord Qin. He obviously doesn't take Yuan Zhen seriously. If they really fight, it will be a big joke. Wouldn't it prove that Heaven Extinction Holy Kingdom is unreasonable and oppressive? From what I can see, the eldest divine son will definitely stop them. He will not let them fight. As the various tyrants were discussing secretly, they glanced at Yuan Zhen to see how he would react. However, Yuan Zhen lowered his head calmly and looked as if he was deep in thought. He did not have the slightest intention to stop them. At the same time, Lord Qin was unable to restrain his anger and attacked. Arrogant kid, go to hell. With a thunderous roar, he threw out 2 mountain-sized flaming fist radiants toward Ji Tianxing. The flaming fist radiance's aura was extremely violent and contained the power to destroy the heavens and earth. It lit up the night sky within a radius of 200 miles. The nearby tyrants could feel the scorching heat and could not help but retreat 100 feet away to avoid being affected by the aftershocks. Ji Tianxing looked at the flaming fist radiance that was coming toward him without the slightest bit of fear. He raised his fists indifferently and punched back with all his might. Star-shattering fist. He threw out 2 silver flaming fist radiants with all his might, and smashed toward Lord Qin with cold and mighty star energy. Bang! Bang! The silver and red flaming fist radiants collided in the night sky, and let out 2 deafening bangs. The 4 flaming fist radiants collapsed at the same time, and burst into light fragments that filled the sky. It created a violent shockwave that spread out in all directions. The various tyrants looked fearful and quickly cast defensive spells to block the shockwave that was coming toward them. Ji Tianxing and Lord Qin's exchange of blows was a draw. Neither of them had the upper hand. Mr. Qin froze on the spot. He narrowed his eyes with a serious expression, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The surrounding tyrants were also shocked and looked at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. Cries of surprise could be heard from the crowd. Oh my God! That kid took Lord Qin's attack, and was not injured at all? This kid has such terrifying strength? He can fight against Lord Qin? He is so young and he is already a 7th level martial sage? This is impossible. If he really has the strength of a 7th level martial sage, he can't be a nobody. Why haven't we seen him before? This is unbelievable. No wonder he dares to be so arrogant and severely injured by Shao of the Heaven-Breaking Alliance. In an instant, everyone stopped looking down on Ji Tianxing, and no longer dared to underestimate him. Even Yuan Zhen, who had been pretending to be in deep thought, suddenly raised his head and looked at Ji Tianxing with burning eyes. Lord Qin was shocked and angry. He also felt ashamed. In his anger, he could not help but take out his magic treasure, and use all his strength to fight against Ji Tianxing. At this moment, Yuan Zhen waved his hand and shouted coldly, "Qinzheng, stop!" Lord Qin was still angry. He looked at Yuan Zhen unwillingly and asked, "Your Highness, this person is too audacious. He has disregarded our country's laws. Shut up." Yuan Jun shouted coldly again and said in a dignified tone. Don't forget that we are here to deal with this matter impartially, not to fight with others. I have always convinced people with reason, and will never use my power to oppress others. Lord Qin unwillingly stopped and suppressed his anger. He bowed respectfully and said, Your Highness is right. I will remember this and will not do it again. Yuan Jun nodded slightly and looked at Ji Tianqing deeply. He said, Don't worry. I will not wrong a good person, nor will I let a bad person go. I will deal with this matter impartially and give both parties an explanation. Haha, is that so? Chapter 2157. Before Lord Qin had struck, Ji Tianqing had thought that Yuan Jun was a reasonable person when he saw Yuan Jun's elegant demeanor. However, it turned out that Yuan Jun was not a good person. Therefore, Suemo did not like Yuan Jun at all. He even felt that Yuan Jun was hypocritical and disgusting. However, Yuan Jun was not embarrassed at all. He pretended that he had not heard Sumo's sneer and continued to ask calmly. After talking for so long, you still don't know who you are? Given your strength and skills, you are definitely not a nobody. Ji Tianqing said calmly. A real man does not change his name. My name is Tianqing and I am from Luoshui Holy Kingdom. When Yuan Jun heard what Suemo had said, his eyes narrowed and a strange look flashed across them. The surrounding powerhouses were also stunned. Soon after, complicated expressions appeared on their faces. Some of them were enlightened and some of them were shocked. Some of them looked curiously at Ji Tianqing and discussed among themselves. Ji Tianqing? He is Ji Tianqing? That's not right. There was a rumor in the underworld that Ji Tianqing had just broken through to the martial sage realm. How could he fight against Lord Qin? Demon. This guy is definitely a demon and his strength is unfathomable. I have heard that he led the army to fight against the demon tribe at the northern border of Luoshui Holy Kingdom and defeated them. He must be a powerful person. Not only did I hear that he defeated the demon tribe army, but I also heard that he killed Inspector Tian Shang and formed a deadly feud with the Broken Sky Alliance. No wonder Bai Xiao gathered 50 powerhouses to deal with him. This guy is too powerful. Ho ho ho, it's a pity that Bai Xiao is not as powerful as Ji Tianqing. He did not kill Ji Tianqing to avenge Tian Shang. Instead, he got himself killed. Most of the powerhouses had heard of Ji Tianqing's deeds and legends. The crowd became more curious about Suemo, and their eyes were filled with respect and fear. There were two groups of people in the crowd who were looking at Ji Tianqing with complicated expressions. They were either worried or happy. There were 3 young martial sages from the Luoshui divine nation. Their leader was a woman who was 7 feet tall. She wore a palace dress and a crown made of yuan and phoenix gemstones. This woman's face was exquisite and beautiful, and her entire body exuded a noble and elegant aura. Her pair of pitch-black eyes were filled with anxiety and worry. She was the Empress of the White Frost Empire, Lu Baishuang. Although the White Frost Empire had many things to do, it was currently rebuilding its home and recuperating. However, she had already arranged the affairs of the empire, and insisted on rushing to Sky City to participate in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. After all, the Sacred Assembly was held once every 50 years and was extremely important. The 2 experts beside Lu Baishuang were both martial sages from the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. One of them was the number 1 sect master of the Eastern Waves Empire. He was only 900 years old, and his name was Zhuomingqi. The other person was from the Tianwu Kingdom. He was the sect leader of the Tianjian sect. His name was Muchangtian. The 3 of them were all from the Luoshui God Nation, so they were naturally worried about Ji Tianqing from the bottom of their hearts. Moreover, Lu Baishuang was also familiar with Ji Tianqing, and the 2 of them had some indescribable experience. Young Master Ji actually offended the Broken Sky Alliance, and even the Divine Guards of the Heaven and Divine Kingdom. I hope he can avert the danger. Lu Baishuang stared at Ji Tianqing and muttered to himself in a low voice. Zhuomingqi also revealed a worried expression, and said in a low voice, Young Master Ji is the number 1 god disciple of the Luoshui Divine Kingdom, and the Heavenly Imperial Guardian. He is very important to the Divine Master. No matter how domineering the Heaven and Divine Kingdom is, They wouldn't dare to punish young Master Ji on their own, unless the Heaven in Divine Kingdom wants to start a war with us. Mu Changtian thought for a moment, and transmitted his voice to the other two. Holy Emperor Bai Shuang, Brother Zhua, we should advance and retreat together with young Master Ji. If Yuan Jun dares to punish him, we must stand out and fight together with young Master Ji. Even if we don't participate in this divine martial sacred assembly, we must not weaken the Luoshui Divine Kingdom's momentum. Lu Baishuang and Zhuo Mingqi both nodded without hesitation. In addition to the three of them, there was another group of people standing in the night sky to the west. There were only two people in this group, one tall and one short, one male and one female. The male was a golden-haired youth who looked to be about 30 years old. His face was fair and handsome, and his blue eyes had a pair of golden pupils. He wore a long golden robe, and the chest and sleeves were embroidered with a golden dragon pattern. He also wore a crown on his head. Standing beside him was a little girl who was about 1 meter tall, and looked like she was carved out of jade. The little girl was extremely nimble and cute. She was wearing a small yellow dress, and her chubby feet were bare. She was sitting on a crescent-shaped flying magic treasure. The two of them stared at Ji Tianqing, and they were both relieved and happy, but also a little worried. The little girl muttered to herself, I didn't expect that in just a few years, Tianqing would break through to the martial saint realm and catch up with me. This guy is really monstrous. I could tell that he was not ordinary back then, but it's a pity that I couldn't keep him in the God Bestowment Mountain. The golden-haired youth beside her rubbed the little girl's head and said with a smile, Jiu, you're praising yourself. Ji Tianqing is already on par with Qin Zheng, and you call that catching up with you? He has obviously surpassed you. Without a doubt, this cute little girl was Jiu, the youngest daughter of martial god Tai Hao. Jiu raised her head and glared at the golden-haired youth. She pouted unhappily and said, Humph, seventh brother, you're mocking me again. Tianqing is a rare genius, and it's natural that he has surpassed me. I'm afraid that when the two of you fight in the void platform, even you won't be his match. I'll laugh at you then. The golden-haired youth glanced at the situation and looked worried. He sighed softly and said, I do want to participate in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly as soon as possible and spar with Ji Tianqing. However, it's still unknown whether he can resolve tonight's matter. Jiu immediately looked worried. She pulled the golden-haired youth's sleeve and pleaded softly, Seventh brother, let's help Tianqing, okay? Yuan Jun is a hypocrite, and Qin Zheng obviously has bad intentions. They will definitely make things difficult for Tianqing. The golden-haired youth nodded without hesitation and said through voice transmission, Tianqing was once a member of the Divine Martial Kingdom. He has made great contributions to the kingdom, and is highly regarded by our father. It's reasonable that we can't just sit by and do nothing. We must help him get out. When Jiu heard this, she smiled and said, Yes, I know that seventh brother is the best. He won't just stand by and do nothing. The golden-haired youth nodded and said through voice transmission, Don't be hasty. Let's observe the situation first. Right at this moment, Yuan Jun spoke. He looked at Ji Tianqing with shining eyes and said, So you're Ji Tianqing. It's true that hearing about you is not as good as meeting you in person. Meeting you in person is even better than hearing about you. I've heard that you're extremely talented and extraordinary. You don't take the martial artists in the world seriously, and you're extremely arrogant. Chapter 2158. Everyone could hear the sarcasm in Yuan Jun's words. He was not hinting at anything, but he was clearly saying that Ji Tianqing was arrogant. When the powerhouses heard this, they could guess what Yuan Jun meant. They could not help but look expectant. Everyone wanted to see how Yuan Jun was going to deal with Ji Tianqing. With Ji Tianqing's arrogant personality, he would not be so soft. Tonight's matter would be difficult to resolve. Lu Baishuang, Jiu, and the others all understood this and became more and more worried. However, Ji Tianqing looked indifferent. He was not anxious or worried at all. He looked at Yuan Jun indifferently and sneered. Whether you are arrogant or not depends on who you are talking to. If you are reasonable, you will not be afraid of anything. No matter how big the world is, it is not bigger than reason. Grand Divine Son, don't you think so? Yuanzhen looked at him deeply and nodded. He sneered. That's right. Everything had to be reasoned with. You came to Skyview City from Luoshui God Kingdom to participate in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. You should abide by the laws of our country. No matter what reason you have, you still went on a killing spree outside the city. You destroyed Qifeng Garden, killed 50 powerhouses, and destroyed Bai Zhao's body. You have caused such a terrible consequence. You must give us an explanation. Otherwise, where will our country's face go? Ji Tianqing didn't budge an inch as he retorted. Bai Zhao gathered so many experts to set up an ambush, intending to kill me outside the Sky City. He wanted to kill me first, and I fought back. Does Grand Divine Sun mean that I can only bear their assassination but not resist? Yuanzhen did not dare to admit it. He quickly shook his head and said, I definitely did not mean that. Don't misunderstand. You can protect yourself, but your methods are too cruel. You have caused such a terrible consequence. You must give us an explanation. Explanation? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said coldly, Since Grand Divine Sun wants to interfere in this matter, I will give you face in front of all the powerhouses tonight. Hearing his words, Yuanzhen's eyes flashed with a hint of complacency. Qinzheng also sneered complacently. Even the surrounding tyrants were disappointed, thinking that Ji Tianqing was going to give in. This was not like his personality, and he was not as arrogant and despotic as the rumors said. However, what Ji Tianqing said next made everyone dumbfounded. Their faces were filled with astonishment. He pointed at Bai Zhao's soul in the night sky and said to Yuanzhen in a serious tone, For the sake of the eldest son of God, I will be magnanimous and not pursue Bai Zhao's crime. I will spare his life, but only this time. If he does it again, no matter who pleads for mercy, I will definitely kill him. Yuanzhen was stunned. His eyes widened slightly as he stared at Ji Tianqing in astonishment. The sneer on Qinzheng's face also froze. His whole person froze in place, staring at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. The various tyrants were also at a loss. They did not understand the situation at all. What was going on? Wasn't Ji Tianqing going to give in and apologize to Bai Zhao for Yuanzhen's sake? He actually dared to say that he would spare Bai Zhao's life for Yuanzhen's sake? If that was not the case, wouldn't he have killed Bai Zhao long ago? Was this what he meant by giving Yuanzhen face? The various tyrants looked at each other. When they came to their senses, they could not help but be speechless. As expected of Ji Tianqing, the legendary arrogant and despotic guy, he did not let them down at all. Lu Baishuang, Jiu, and the others in the crowd suddenly smiled knowingly. Based on their understanding of Ji Tianqing, this was Ji Tianqing's style. Yuanzhen's face became gloomy. He stared at Ji Tianqing sharply and asked in a deep voice, Ji Tianqing, are you serious? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked in return, What? Do I look like I'm joking? You. Yuanzhen immediately frowned. His face was filled with anger. He gritted his teeth and said, You're very good. His chest was filled with raging anger. He even had a trace of killing intent. However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, he could only suppress his killing intent. He could not easily reveal it. Moreover, he was deeply trusted and valued by martial god Tianzhu. He knew many secrets that ordinary people did not know. For example, Ji Tianqing's other identity. Therefore, he could only temporarily suppress his anger and plan for the future. Ji Tianqing ignored his complicated expression and nodded. I've always been very good. I don't need your concern. If there are no other questions, tonight's matter ends here. Goodbye. After that, he ignored Yuanzhen and Qinzheng, turned around and was about to leave. Qinzheng instinctively took a step forward and was about to shout to stop Ji Tianqing from leaving. However, Yuanzhen raised his right hand and stopped Qinzheng. Qinzheng looked at him in confusion and asked through voice transmission, Your Highness, Ji Tianqing is so presumptuous. Are you just going to let him go like this? Yuanzhen was expressionless. He replied through voice transmission, Qinzheng, there are some things that you don't understand. Yi Lushui knows better than you. When dealing with Ji Tianqing, you can't be too hasty, and you can't do it in front of everyone. Qinzheng frowned and thought for a while. He nodded as if he understood. He had made up his mind to ask Yi Lu Shui when he was free. Seeing Ji Tianxing turn around and fly across the night sky, he was about to leave. The tyrants around were also shocked and disappointed. They whispered to each other and discussed. Ji Tianxing is leaving just like that? Is this over? How could this be? The Grand Divine Son and Lord Qin came aggressively. In the end, it was all talk and no action. Ji Tianxing's way of doing things is even more arrogant than the rumors say. How could the Grand Divine Son tolerate it? Why do I feel like something's not right? Something's not right. What's so strange about it? Ji Tianxing is the heavenly imperial guardian of the Luo Shui divine nation. He just made a great contribution. How could the Grand Divine Son kill him? That's true. The three divine nations have always been in harmony. If the Grand Divine Son killed Ji Tianxing on his own accord, I'm afraid it would cause a war between the two divine nations. Just as everyone was discussing, a thunderous roar came from the night sky in the north. You want to leave after killing someone from the heaven-breaking alliance? In your dreams. The sudden roar was like a thunderclap, shaking the night sky for hundreds of miles. Immediately, everyone above the ruins turned their heads and looked to the north. Even Ji Tianxing stopped and looked at the night sky in the north. They saw a silver starlight cut through the night sky like a shooting star, speeding toward them at an incredible speed. In just a few breaths, the silver light arrived above the ruins from hundreds of miles away. Swish! After the starlight dissipated, a middle-aged man who was more than 10 feet tall and as brawny as an iron tower was revealed. The man was wearing black dragon scale armor, a scarlet cape and a broadsword as wide as a bench at his waist. He was emitting a fierce and domineering aura. He had a head full of curly brown hair and a dignified square face. His skin was bronze and his eyes were sharp and intimidating. Chapter 2159. Originally, the most powerful person present was the first divine son, Yuanzhen. However, this domineering middle-aged man's aura was even more powerful than Yuanzhen's, and he seemed to be in control of the entire place. Without a doubt, he was more powerful than Yuanzhen, and had already reached the rank 9 martial sage realm. All the top powers in the night sky focused their attention on the middle-aged man. Some people looked at him curiously, while others recognized his identity and showed a look of surprise. Ji Tianxing, who was outside the crowd, glanced at the middle-aged man and frowned as he tried to recall who he was. The alliance leader of the Broken Sky Alliance, Wu Duantian. His thoughts were immediately pulled back to over 1,500 years ago, to that night of thunderstorms and rain. At that moment, Wu Duantian cupped his fists towards Yuanzhen and said, "Your Highness, long time no see." Yuanzhen smiled as he cupped his fists and replied, "Greetings, Alliance Leader Wu." With that, he looked at Wu Duantian carefully and was shocked. It seems that Alliance Leader Wu's seclusion has been fruitful and his divine skills have improved. All the top powers saw that Wu Duantian's strength had reached the rank 9 martial sage realm, and they were shocked as they exclaimed, "Oh my god." Before Wu Duantian went into seclusion, he was still a rank 8 martial sage. Now that he has come out, he has broken through to the rank 9 martial sage realm. Back then, there was a rumor in the mainland that Wu Duantian was the closest to the god realm, and could be the first to break through to the god realm. It seems that it is true. The rank 9 martial sage realm is the limit of the martial sage realm, and he is half a step to the god realm. He is half a step away from breaking through to the god realm, and becoming the 4th martial god in the mainland. Everyone knows that he is crazy about martial arts, and they call him the martial madman. Who would have thought that he is the most likely to break through to the god realm? As the top powers discussed, they looked at Wu Duantian with respect and fear. Wu Duantian did not say anything as he lowered his head to look at the ruins below him. Seeing that the once majestic fantastic maple garden had become a pile of debris and the entire mountain had collapsed into ruins, he frowned and his face darkened. Looking behind Yuanzhen, he saw Baijiao's soul floating helplessly in the night sky. Wu Duantian was instantly enraged. Murderous intent surged in his eyes as he growled, "Who destroyed my wonderful maple garden and injured Patrol Baijiao?" The night sky was silent. Everyone was silent and didn't say a word. Everyone knew that Yuanzhen's identity was special. He represented the heaven and divine nation, so he didn't dare to casually punish Ji Tianxing in order to avoid a dispute between the two nations. However, Wu Duantian was different. He was the alliance master of the Broken Sky Alliance, and had always acted in an iron-blooded and domineering manner. What's more, Ji Tianxing had killed a member of the Broken Heaven Alliance, so Wu Duantian had the right to avenge them. All the tyrants turned their heads to look at Ji Tianxing, their gazes focused on him. Some looked like they were watching a good show, some sneered at his misfortune, and some looked worried. A few of the experts who were closer to Ji Tianxing retreated, allowing Wu Duantian to look directly at him. Wu Duantian's gaze landed on Ji Tianxing as he growled with murderous intent. "You did it? When I just came out of seclusion, I heard that there was a bastard called Ji Tianxing who killed many experts of the Broken Sky Alliance, and even killed patrol envoy Tian Chong. Now, it seems that the brat who doesn't know his place is you." Wu Duantian roared as he walked closer to Ji Tianxing. His entire body exuded a formless aura that pressed towards Ji Tianxing like a landslide, covering the night sky. Seeing that he was about to reach Ji Tianxing, he immediately attacked. With his strength as a level 9 martial sage, once he attacked Ji Tianxing, no one would be able to defend against him. Ji Tianxing was in an extremely dangerous situation. Jiu, Lu Baishuang and the rest instantly felt their hearts in their throats as they wanted to jump out to stop him. However, at this moment, an unexpected scene occurred. Wu Duantian had just rushed in front of Ji Tianxing when he saw his face clearly and felt his gaze and aura. He was stunned on the spot. His body stiffened as if he had been petrified. He stood in front of Ji Tianxing and stared at Ji Tianxing's face. His eyes were like copper bells as he revealed an expression of seeing a ghost. After being stunned for a moment, he could not help but raise his hand to wipe his eyes. Deep shock and disbelief caused his entire body to tremble, and he couldn't help but cry out in surprise. "No, this is impossible. How can it be you? Didn't you die long ago? How can you still be alive? My eyes must be playing tricks on me, it must be." Wu Duantian, who was still full of murderous intent earlier, had become like this in the blink of an eye. His murderous intent had disappeared, and he was filled with fear and terror. His expression was extremely ugly. Seeing his reaction, all the tyrants frowned and looked puzzled. What's wrong with Alliance Chief Wu? Could it be that he knows Ji Tianxing? That's impossible. Alliance Chief Wu has been in seclusion for 200 years and Ji Tianxing has only risen in recent years. But looking at Wu Duantian's expression, it's obvious that he knows Ji Tianxing and he looks very, very afraid of him. That's strange. Who did Alliance Chief Wu think Ji Tianxing is? Alright. I suddenly remembered a rumor. There was a rumor that Ji Tianxing is the reincarnation of Kenshin. Ji Tianxing? The reincarnation of Kenshin? Which Kenshin? Isn't this too ridiculous? Nonsense. Since ancient times, only one person dared to call himself Kenshin. Who do you think it is? The discussions of the various tyrants naturally also reached Yuan Zhen and Qin Zheng's ears. Initially, Qin Zheng thought it was strange that Wu Duantian had suddenly stopped talking. Hearing everyone's discussion, Qin Zheng was enlightened and his heartbeat accelerated. He turned his head to look at Yuan Zhen. Only then did he realize that Yuan Zhen had a well-thought-out posture and a confident smile on his lips. Qin Zheng then realized that Yuan Zhen had known about the rumor for a long time. At the same time, Ji Tianxing frowned and looked at Wu Duantian in front of him. "If there's nothing else, I'll leave now. I don't have time to waste with you." His expression and tone were very cold, and he even gave off a feeling of being condescending. Wu Duantian frowned and looked at him, unsure if he was real or not. After hearing his voice, Wu Duantian's body shook and he could not help but shout. "It's you! It's really you! Your appearance, your eyes, the aura of your soul, and your voice. Nothing has changed. Kenshin, you've already been dead for thousands of years. How could you appear again?" Ji Tianxing frowned and said expressionlessly, "Are you crazy? What nonsense are you spouting?" Wu Duantian was not angry after being scolded. Instead, he was even more certain and said excitedly, "Don't try to deny it. I remember everything about you clearly, and I will never forget it. Even if you don't admit it, I won't be wrong." Chapter 2160. Even though Ji Tianxing denied it. However, Wu Duantian swore that he was the sword god, and his words were incomparably certain and absolute. There was a subtle change in the expressions of the tyrants. There were a few veteran martial saints who were fortunate enough to have seen Qinshin's true appearance. They stared at Ji Tianxing and studied him for a while. Their memories were awakened, and they nodded secretly. In the crowd, there was another wave of whispers and discussions. Martial Saint Chaoying, who was wearing a white dress and a Taoist crown, looked at the old man beside her with a puzzled expression. She asked softly, "Master, I remember you saying that you went to Tianju Mountain and had the fortune to see Qinshin. Is that true?" The white-haired Martial Saint Xingshan looked at Ji Tianxing with a complicated expression. He replied softly, "Yes, it is true. Qinshin opened a dojo at Tianju Mountain and accepted disciples. Not only did he challenge the martial saints of the various clans, but he also preached martial arts at the dojo at the end of every month. Back then, I traveled thousands of miles to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to witness the sword god's glory and spar with him. However, after ascending the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, I personally witnessed the battle between the sword god and a martial sage. That martial sage was defeated in less than 3 moves. Therefore, I decided not to challenge him and listen to Qinshin's preaching instead. I have indeed benefited a lot." Speaking of the past, Martial Saint Xingshan had a complicated expression on his face. There was a hint of sorrow in his eyes. Chao Ying's eyes lit up. She asked quickly, "Master, since you have seen Qinshin's true appearance, then this Ji Tianxing in front of you, is he Qinshin?" Martial Saint Xingshan was silent for a while. He nodded and said, "His figure, appearance, gaze, and aura are exactly the same. He is exactly the same as Qinshin. However, the sword god had fallen 1,000 years ago. This was something that everyone knew. After 1,000 years, how can Qinshin appear again? The dead cannot be brought back to life, and Qinshin was no exception. The so-called reincarnation is simply too absurd." Chaoying continued to ask, "Master, are you saying that Ji Tianxing is only very similar to Qinshin, but he is not Qinshin's reincarnation?" The martial saint hesitated and shook his head lightly. "I'm not sure. After all, the world is big and there are all kinds of strange things. Moreover, this person is exactly the same as Qinshin. Apart from himself, I'm afraid no one can tell his true identity." While the mountain-exploring martial saint and Chaoying were discussing, the other veteran martial saints were also discussing similar topics with the younger generation beside them. Anyone who had met Qinshin was certain that Ji Tianxing was exactly the same as Qinshin. However, the idea of reincarnation was too far-fetched and absurd. It was hard to believe. Outside the crowd, a middle-aged man in a golden dragon robe and a double dragon golden crown stood in the night sky with an indifferent expression. He stared at Ji Tianxing with intense hatred and murderous intent in his eyes. If Ji Tianxing saw him, he would definitely recognize him. He was one of the 6 sacred emperors of the vast divine kingdom, Sacred Emperor Chu Yun. When Ji Tianxing was in the vast divine kingdom, he had forged the sword of the burial of heaven and offered it to Sacred Emperor Chu Yun. In the end, Sacred Emperor Chu Yun gave up the Chu Yun Empire for a fake sword, causing the Chu Yun Empire to almost collapse. When martial god Taihao learned of this, he personally summoned Ji Tianxing and threw Sacred Emperor Chu Yun into the endless dark prison, punishing him to reflect in the dark prison for 100 years. However, for some reason, Sacred Emperor Chu Yun had appeared again in just a few years. Behind Chu Yun's Sacred Emperor stood a white-haired old man in a black robe. The elder's aura was very calm. He held a dark golden book in his left hand and a large black brush in his right hand. He had the demeanor and aura of an otherworldly expert. He was the sacred master of the Chu Yun Empire, the 3-talent sage who assisted Sacred Emperor Chu Yun. At that moment, all the powerful people were discussing Ji Tianxing's identity. Even though they recognized that he looked exactly like Qinshin, no one believed that he was reincarnated. Seeing that everyone was hesitating, Wu Duantian was in a dilemma. The first divine son, Yuanzhen, also pondered with a solemn expression. Sacred Emperor Chu Yun's lips curled into a cold smile as he muttered to himself, "Ha ha ha, my chance is here." Back then, he killed with a borrowed sword. Tonight, I'll kill with a borrowed sword. The three-talent sage frowned slightly and reminded him softly, Sacred Emperor, all the powerful people are here. The seventh divine son and His Highness Jiujio are also here. It's not a good time for you to show yourself. In my opinion, why don't you bear with it for the time being and spread the news later? Sacred Emperor Chu Yun shook his head and said in a venomous tone, I don't have the right to participate in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, but I came all the way to Skyview City just to take revenge on Ji Tianxing. Now that all the martial saints are here, and he has offended the Broken Sky Alliance and Yuanzhen, now is the best time. With that, he ignored the three-talent sage's advice and walked toward the center of the hall. Everyone, please listen to me. He passed through the crowd and shouted loudly, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Everyone has seen that Ji Tianxing is exactly the same as Kenshin from 1,000 years ago. Maybe everyone thinks that reincarnation is too absurd. But who is Kenshin? He is the divine king who ruled over thousands of worlds. He must have unimaginable means. So, it's reasonable that Kenshin can come back from the dead. If you don't believe me, I can show you proof that Ji Tianxing is Kenshin's reincarnation. Great Emperor Chu Yun's words reverberated through the night sky within a 100-mile radius. More than 30 groups of tyrants and hundreds of powerhouses from different countries were all shocked and looked at him with anticipation. Ji Tianxing turned his head and looked at Sacred Emperor Chu Yun sharply. When he saw Sacred Emperor Chu Yun's face, he frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Damn it! Isn't Sacred Emperor Chu Yun imprisoned in the boundless dark prison? Why is he here? The seventh deity and Jiujio also turned to look at Sacred Emperor Chu Yun. When the two of them realized that it was Sacred Emperor Chu Yun who was kicking them when they were down, their expressions changed and anger flashed in their eyes. Jiujio stared at Sacred Emperor Chu Yun angrily and shouted, Yin Chu Yun, what nonsense are you talking about? The seventh deity also stepped forward and said coldly, Sacred Emperor Chu Yun, what happened tonight is a dispute between Luoshui Holy Nation and Heaven End Holy Nation. It has nothing to do with the vast Holy Nation. You just have to watch from the sidelines. If you dare to talk nonsense again, I won't let you off easily. Taihao Yunqi was highly regarded and trusted by martial god Taihao. He was also the most outstanding genius among the deities. His identity and words carried a lot of weight in the vast Holy Nation. Sacred Emperor Chu Yun was prepared. He bowed to the seventh deity and Jiujio and said calmly, Yin Chu Yun greets Yunqi and Jiujio. Chapter 2161. Holy Emperor Chu Yun's attitude was neither servile nor overbearing, and his tone was confident. The powerful people of the various countries had their own conclusions. Everyone believed Holy Emperor Chu Yun's words, and had high hopes for him. As for the seventh Shenxi and Jiujio, everyone could tell that the two of them were obviously protecting Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing glanced at Holy Emperor Chu Yun before turning to look at the seventh Shenxi and Jiujio. He nodded at the two of them. He had not expected Taihao Yunqi and Jiujio to come to Wangtian City as well. Now that the two of them had stepped forward to speak up for him, he had noticed their presence. Taihao Yunqi and Jiujio nodded at him with an encouraging and comforting look. On the other side, Wu Duantian, Yuanzhen, Qinzheng and the rest were still hesitating. Now that they heard Holy Emperor Chu Yun's words, the three of them looked at Holy Emperor Chu Yun with hopeful eyes. Yuanzhen nodded at him and said with a smile, Since Holy Emperor Chu Yun has good intentions and wants to help us resolve tonight's matter, I'm very grateful. I wonder if Holy Emperor Chu Yun has any evidence. Please show it. Wu Duantian looked at Holy Emperor Chu Yun with anticipation and said excitedly, I will remember your kindness in my heart. Holy Emperor Chu Yun had predicted that Wu Duantian and Yuanzhen would want to know the truth, which was why he had stepped forward. Now that Wu Duantian and Yuanzhen had taken the bait, he was very pleased. He looked at the tyrants around him and said in a loud voice, I believe everyone knows that when the sword god became famous, he had a divine sword with him that never left his side. That sword is called the Burial of Heaven. Everyone should still remember what that sword looks like. Now the sword that Ji Tianxing is using is also a dark and cold treasure sword, which is exactly the same as the Burial of Heaven. Everyone was shocked by Saint Emperor Chu Yun's words. Many of the powerful people had complicated looks in their eyes. Chu Yun, Divine Emperor, didn't give up. He pointed at Ji Tianxing and continued, "He looks exactly the same as Sword God. If it's just a coincidence, Sword God won't give up. Then, the sword he used was the same as the legendary Burial of Heaven. Could this be a coincidence? How could there be so many coincidences in the world? Therefore, the truth and the answer are on the verge of being revealed. I believe everyone should understand by now." After saying that, Chu Yun Saint Emperor cupped his hands towards Yuan Zhen and Wu Duantian, and left with a smile. The way the tyrants looked at Ji Tianxing changed. Yuan Zhen's expression grew colder and colder, and there was an imperceptible sneer in the depths of his eyes. Wu Duantian fell into silence as he stared at Ji Tianxing. His chest heaved up and down rapidly. It was obvious that his emotions were surging and his thoughts were unstable. Lu Baishuang, Mu Changtian, and Zhuo Mingqi were astounded too, as they found it unbelievable. However, after the three of them regained their senses, they became even more worried for Ji Tianxing. They knew very well what the news of Ji Tianxing being Kenshin's reincarnation meant. This would definitely bring endless calamity and danger to Ji Tianxing. Regardless of whether or not he was Kenshin's reincarnation, this news would cause a huge uproar and shock the entire Shenwu continent. He would definitely be caught in the center of the maelstrom, standing at the heart of the storm, and becoming the target of public criticism. Taihao Yunqi and Jiu Jiu were also shocked, and they looked at each other with complicated expressions. The two of them were shocked by Ji Tianxing's identity, but they were also worried about his safety. At this moment, Lu Baishuang stepped forward without hesitation and said in a sonorous tone, "What Holy Emperor Chu Yun said just now was only his side of the story. This is a false accusation against Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's strength is extremely high, and he has always used qi to control his sword. When has he ever used a treasure sword? Everyone, don't listen to Holy Emperor Chu Yun's nonsense. He must have some enmity with Ji Tianxing, which is why he is deliberately slandering and framing him." Lu Baishuang had seen Ji Tianxing use a sword before, and she had also noticed that pitch-black treasure sword. However, at this juncture, she did not care whether or not that sword was the sword of the Burial of Heaven. She only wanted to help Ji Tianxing defend himself. She did not want to see Ji Tianxing become the target of public criticism, and she was even more unwilling to see Ji Tianxing being persecuted. However, just as she finished speaking, Bai Zhao's spirit, who was beside Wu Duantian, let out an indignant roar. "Liar! You are lying. When Ji Tianxing fought with me just now, he clearly used a pitch-black treasure sword, and it was exactly the same as the legendary sword of the Burial of Heaven. Ji Tianxing is Kenshin's reincarnation. If that is not the case, how can he be so powerful? He has just broken through to the martial sage realm not long ago, and yet he was able to defeat me and kill Inspector Tian Shan. This is the only explanation that makes sense." Bai Xiao was the victim, and his physical body had been destroyed by Ji Tianxing. As such, his words were the most credible. The various top powers would not doubt his words. In this way, Ji Tianxing's true identity was confirmed. He was Kenshin's reincarnation. Kenshin, who had fallen 1,000 years ago, had really been reborn. In an instant, the night sky was silent, and one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's expressions and eyes were filled with shock, astonishment, excitement and excitement. Everyone's gaze was focused on him. Yuan Zhen looked at him with a faint smile and said in a mocking tone, "I did not expect you to hide your strength so well. No wonder you are so powerful, breaking through to the martial sage realm at such a young age, and even defeating stronger opponents. I see. Kenshin, you are indeed the #1 genius, the most legendary person in the world." Qin Zheng chimed in with a mocking sneer. "Hee, everyone present tonight is truly fortunate to be able to witness the rebirth of the sword god of this generation with their own eyes. Logically speaking, most of us here are Kenshin's juniors. Come, let's bow to Kenshin, shall we?" Although Qin Zheng had said so, none of the top powers dared to move. Even a fool could see that Yuan Zhen and Qin Zheng's attitude towards Kenshin was not one of respect and admiration. Ji Tianxing was in an extremely dangerous situation. However, his expression remained calm, and he did not admit nor refute. He looked at Wu Duantian indifferently and said, Wu Duantian, this is between me and the Broken Sky Alliance, and it has nothing to do with other people. You have already wasted too much time, and I only have one question for you. How do you intend to settle this matter? Wu Duantian frowned and glanced at Suemo cautiously, unable to make up his mind. If it were anyone else who had such a deep grudge with the Heaven-Shattering Alliance, he would definitely kill them on the spot to take revenge. However, Suemo was the #1 god disciple of Luoshui Holy Kingdom, the Heavenly Imperial Guardian, and the reincarnation of the famous Kenshin. When he thought of the two words Kenshin, he could not help but recall the scene from 1,000 years ago. It was a rainy night. Chapter 2162. What had happened that night was Wu Duantian's nightmare. It was a shame that he could not get rid of for the rest of his life. It was also the turning point of his rebirth, the turning point of his rise in adversity. He would never forget the scene of that night for the rest of his life. Therefore, if he really had to make a move against Kenshin, he would feel fear and trepidation from the depths of his soul. Yuan Jun, who was the closest to him, could naturally see his hesitation and fear. Yuan Jun pretended to cough and said solemnly, Alliance Master Wu, although this is my country's territory, this matter is between the Broken Sky Alliance and Ji Tianxing. You should be the one to deal with it, and it is not appropriate for me to overstep my boundaries. I believe that Alliance Master Wu already has an answer in his heart. Naturally, you will not tarnish the Broken Sky Alliance's reputation, nor will you disappoint the 100,000 members of the Broken Sky Alliance. On the surface, Yuan Jun looked like he had nothing to do with this matter, and what he said was also reasonable. But in reality, he was hinting to Wu Duantian that killing Ji Tianxing was imperative. Otherwise, not only would the Broken Sky Alliance's reputation be tarnished, but the 100,000 members of the alliance would also be disillusioned. From today onwards, Wu Duantian and the Broken Sky Alliance would lose all face, and they would become the laughingstock of Shimwu continent. Wu Duantian naturally understood Yuan Jun's meaning. In reality, he was already riding a tiger and could not back down. He finally stopped hesitating and made up his mind. He said in a low voice, Ji Tianxing, as the saying goes, a life for a life, and a debt must be repaid. No matter who you are, no matter what methods you have. You killed over 100 of our alliance's elites, killed Inspector Tianshang, and heavily injured Inspector Bai Shao. This is an unforgivable blood feud. As the Alliance Master, I can only seek justice from you in front of all the heroes tonight. With that, a golden light flashed in his palm, and a dark golden treasured blade appeared. His entire body burst forth with a towering battle intent, and he immediately locked onto Ji Tianxing's spirit aura. Ji Tianxing, make your move. Tonight, you and I will settle our grudges here, and we will be responsible for our own deaths. Regardless of the outcome, your grudge with the Broken Sky Alliance will be written off. Wu Duantian's voice was cold and stern, causing the temperature of the night sky to drop to freezing point. Yuan Jun and Qin Zheng's eyes contained a trace of a faintly discernible sneer, an attitude of watching a good show. Saint Emperor Chu Yun, who was at the periphery of the crowd, looked smug as he sneered. Ji Tianxing, oh Ji Tianxing, you're doomed this time. You're dead for sure. As for the other tyrants, their faces were filled with excitement and anticipation. Their eyes were bright. Everyone wanted to see with their own eyes what the Kenshin reincarnated Ji Tianxing was capable of. Facing Wu Duantian, a half-step divine expert, would he be able to continue creating miracles? At this moment, a clear and angry shout rang out. Wu Duantian, Ji Tianxing is the #1 god disciple of our Luo River god nation, a heavenly imperial guardian personally bestowed upon him by the Luo River god lord. What qualifications do you have to force him to duel with you? Is the Broken Sky Alliance so arrogant that they don't even care about the Luo River god nation and the Luo River god lord? Hearing this, everyone turned their heads to look. They saw Lu Baishuang taking the lead and walking to Ji Tianxing's side, looking coldly at Wu Duantian. Following closely behind her were Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian. The three martial sages from the Luo River god nation were clustered around Ji Tianxing. It was obvious that they wanted to advance and retreat with Ji Tianxing. Immediately after, another man's sonorous and powerful voice sounded. Ji Tianxing was also the #1 god disciple of the vast god nation. He had made great contributions to our nation, and was highly regarded and trusted by our father. I'm Taihao Yunqi and my sister Jiujio. I'm willing to advance and retreat with Ji Tianxing. As the voice rang out, Shensi Yunqi and Jiujio walked out from the crowd and stood beside Ji Tianxing. Taihao Yunqi was very confident and elegant. He looked at Wu Duantian calmly and said in a resolute tone, "If Alliance Chief Wu is unwilling to give me face and insists on killing Ji Tianxing for revenge, then come at me with all you've got. I'm not that talented, but I'd like to experience Alliance Leader Wu's skills." Taihao Yunqi and Jiujio were the most favored daughters of the martial god Taihao. They represented the vast god nation. No one had expected that the two of them would step forward and go against the Broken Sky Alliance for Ji Tianxing. It was understandable that Lu Baishuang and the other two would help Ji Tianxing. After all, they were all from the Luo River God Nation. However, no one had expected that Ji Tianxing would have such a close relationship with the vast God Nation. In an instant, the atmosphere became complicated and oppressive. As the various powerhouses discussed among themselves, Wu Duantian's expression turned solemn, and he was hesitating again. Yuan Zhen secretly clenched his fists and his heart was filled with anger. Originally, Wu Duantian was about to kill Ji Tianxing. His plan to kill with a borrowed knife was about to succeed. However, in the blink of an eye, his plan was ruined. He hated Taihao Yunqi and Jiujio to death and scolded them for being nosy. Wu Duantian frowned and coldly glanced at Lu Baishuang and Taihao Yunqi. He asked in a low voice, "Humph, are you trying to threaten this lord? Do you think you can force me to take a step back because you have more people?" Lu Baishuang said coldly, "It's not that we have more people, but we hope you can consider the consequences. Do you want to kill Ji Tianxing? God Lord Luo River will definitely punish you." Jiujio said with a face full of anger, "Alliance Leader Wu, we know Ji Tianxing's character better than you do. He killed your Broken Sky Alliance's people because he was forced to protect himself. Don't ruin the Broken Sky Alliance's great future because of a moment of anger. Think about your 100,000 sect members. Think about your 1,000 years of hard work. Stop." A threat. This was a blatant threat. Wu Duantian was so angry that he laughed. He pointed his saber at the crowd and shouted, "Good. Very good. You dare to use the Luo River God Kingdom and the vast God Kingdom to pressure me. You protect Ji Tianxing, but do you think the people he killed deserve to die?" Taihao Yunqi said expressionlessly, "Alliance Leader Wu, you know best whether your subordinates deserve to die or not. As for the rest, you don't have to say anything. You only have two choices now. You can either give up or fight with us. You will be responsible for your own life." Wu Duantian was so angry that his face twisted. He shouted with a murderous aura, "Impossible. As the alliance leader, how can I just sit by and watch my people get killed? Since all of you are working together, don't blame me for being impolite." As soon as he finished speaking, his body burst into flames and he was about to attack the crowd. The faces of the various tyrants changed, and they could not help but cry out. Has Wu Duantian gone mad? No matter how strong he is, he can't win against 6 martial saints. Moreover, Taihao Yunqi and Jiujio are the children of the vast God Lord. If Wu Duantian dares to hurt them, he is definitely courting death. Just as the crowd was discussing, Ji Tianxing finally spoke. Chapter 2163. Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Wu Duantian put down his saber. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a sharp gaze and sneered. "What? You don't have the face to ask them to block the saber for you? That's right. You are the supreme Kenshin. How can you hide behind others and rely on their protection?" Ji Tianxing ignored him and turned to Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, Jiujio and the rest and bowed. "Thank you all for stepping forward and helping me. I am extremely grateful. However, I will take responsibility for my own actions. I will still have to deal with this matter. Thank you for your kindness, but please go back." Lu Baishuang could not help but stare at him and said worriedly, "Young Master Ji, now is not the time to be stubborn. If we join forces, Wu Duantian will not be able to do anything to us." Jiao tugged at his sleeve and said worriedly, "Tianqing, Wu Duantian is a half-step to divine realm martial artist. You have just broken through to martial sage realm not long ago. You should not fight with him. Don't think that you are dragging us down. We are willing to do this. Don't worry, we will not let him hurt you." Tai Hao Yunqi hurriedly nodded and wanted to persuade him as well. However, he had already made up his mind. After bowing to everyone, he turned to Wu Duantian and said, "Wu Duantian, there is something that you should know. With our current status and strength, I can't kill you and you can't kill me. You don't even dare to kill me. Hence, there is no need to fight to the death. It is a waste of time. I have a suggestion that you can consider." Wu Duantian agreed with his suggestion and asked coldly, "What suggestion?" Ji Tianqing said indifferently, "I will take 3 of your attacks and not retaliate. I will not use any treasures. I will be responsible for my own life and death. After the 3 attacks, we will forget about all our previous grievances." Hearing his words, Wu Duantian's eyes widened and he asked in disbelief, "You will take 3 of my attacks and not retaliate or use any treasures? Are you sure?" "I am sure," Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly. Lu Baishuang, Jiao, and the rest felt their hearts in their throats. "No. Young Master Ji. How can you be so reckless?" Lu Baishuang grabbed his arm and anxiously said, "What's the difference between this and suicide? Absolutely not. We will never agree to it." Tai Hao Yunqi and Jiao hurriedly shook their heads, anxiously trying to dissuade him. "Tianqing, Wu Duantian is already half a step into the divine realm. How could you possibly receive 3 of his moves with your bare hands? Ji Tianqing, what you're doing is no different from courting death. What's the point?" Lu Baishuang, Jiao, and the others were not the only ones who were worried. Even the various tyrants were filled with shock as they let out low cries. This is too ridiculous. Receiving Wu Duantian's 3 moves without using any treasures. Wouldn't they be blasted into smithereens? Ji Tianqing is probably overconfident this time. His opponent is Wu Duantian. You're confident and arrogant enough. Unfortunately, you're destined to have a tragic ending. Even if he uses his Dharma treasure, he might not be able to block 3 moves, let alone without it. Almost everyone felt that Ji Tianqing's suggestion was no different from suicide. Only Yuanzhen frowned and thought for a while. He sneered and said, "Ji Tianqing, your suggestion is not appropriate. You've killed so many people from the Broken Sky Alliance, and even destroyed Inspector Bai Zhao's body. With such a tragic outcome, you want to resolve it with just 3 moves from Alliance leader Wu? You want to compensate for the lives of so many people? Isn't this too easy?" Qin Zheng hurriedly nodded in agreement and said loudly, "Your Highness is right. From what I see, you'll need at least 10 moves." As soon as he said that, Lu Baishuang, Jiao, and the others all glared at Qin Zheng with murderous intent. The various tyrants also revealed strange expressions. Their views towards Qin Zheng and Yuanzhen had changed greatly. This kind of despicable person who fanned the flames and added insult to injury was the most despicable. Any magnanimous martial artist would not do such a thing. Wu Duantian was also forthright. He immediately waved his hand and said, "All right. Ji Tianqing, seeing that you're so sincere, I'll agree to your suggestion. I'm 8 levels higher than you. 3 moves it is. Killing you, 3 moves are enough." As soon as he said that, this matter was decided. It was useless for anyone to say anything. Everyone retreated to the sides and watched the battle from afar. In the night sky above the ruins, only Ji Tianqing and Wu Duantian were left. Wu Duantian silently channeled his mana. His entire body lit up with dark red flames. His aura rose steadily until it reached its peak. The surrounding 200 miles of night sky was lit up by the dark red flames. He was like a blazing ball of light, more dazzling than the stars in the night sky. Ji Tianqing stood in the night sky 10 miles away from him. His expression was calm and indifferent. His hands were behind his back. There was no glow of mana on his body. He did not even condense a mana shield. He looked as if he was defenseless. After a while, Wu Duantian's aura reached its peak. He suddenly shouted, "Ji Tianxing, take this. The first move, martial reversal of the universe." As he shouted coldly, he held the dark golden treasured saber with both hands. He suddenly slashed out 1,000 feet long golden saber radiance. The saber radiance was as bright as the sun. It carried the power to split the heavens and earth as it slashed down from the night sky. The power of this saber radiance was extremely terrifying. Even the dark night sky was torn apart by the saber radiance. A wide crack appeared in the void. Seeing this scene, everyone present widened their eyes, revealing a face full of shock. Oh my God! He actually slashed the void with one saber radiance. As expected of a half-step to divine realm expert. It's too terrifying. How can a body of flesh and blood withstand such unparalleled power? I'm afraid only a martial god expert can block this saber radiance. It's over. Ji Tianxing is definitely going to die. Such thoughts flashed through the minds of countless people. Lu Baishuang and Jiujio's hearts were in their throats. They were so worried that they even forgot to breathe. In the next moment, the golden saber radiance that could split the heavens and earth finally hit Ji Tianxing. His figure was immediately drowned by the saber radiance. However, the strange thing was that there was no muffled sound or explosion. The terrifying saber radiance seemed to have slashed through the air. It passed through Ji Tianxing's figure and slashed down to the ruins below. After the saber radiance slashed through, Ji Tianxing's figure was split into two halves from the middle. There was no blood splattering, nor was there any flesh flying. The two halves of the figure collapsed and dissipated on the spot like bubbles. Then, the saber radiance slashed down on the ruins with a loud bang, causing an earth-shattering explosion. Suddenly, endless soil and stones burst out, covering the night sky. The ground within a few hundred miles shook violently, and countless ravines cracked open. Even Wangtian City, which was thousands of miles away, was shaken more than a dozen times. The incomparably violent golden shockwave spread out in all directions, sweeping through a radius of 500 miles. The various experts were further away, but they still had to use defensive secret techniques to resist the power of the shockwave. Chapter 2164. Just the aftershock of Wu Duantian's saber qi was enough to severely injure the experts who were dozens of miles away. One could only imagine the terrifying power that Ji Tianxing, who was locked onto by the saber qi, had to endure. All the tycoons widened their eyes and stared at the situation in the field. Everyone wanted to know how Ji Tianxing ended up. Was he killed by Wu Duantian's saber qi, or was he severely injured? The crowd could not figure out how Ji Tianxing managed to block the saber qi without using any Dharma treasures. The power was too terrifying. After a while, the dust and golden light that covered the sky finally dissipated. The night sky regained its clarity. Wu Duantian's figure appeared and stood proudly in the night sky. 10 miles away from him, Ji Tianxing, who was in a white robe, stood unharmed in the night sky. Seeing this scene, many experts were stunned for a moment, and all of them revealed looks of disbelief. Oh my God! How is this possible? He blocked Alliance Master Wu's saber qi and is unharmed? This is unbelievable. How did he do it? Did everyone see it clearly? Did he use any Dharma treasures? I saw it clearly. He definitely did not use any Dharma treasures. He did not even dodge. This is a miracle. Not only were the powerhouses stunned, but Yuan Zhen Qinzheng and the great emperor of Chu Yun frowned and looked incredulous. As for Wu Duantian, he looked at Ji Tianxing with a complicated expression. His eyes were filled with doubt. He could not understand. That saber qi had locked onto Ji Tianxing's spiritual soul aura. No matter what, Ji Tianxing could not have dodged it. In the end, he was not injured at all. How did he do it? At this moment, Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, Wu Duantian, the first move is over. It's time for you to make your move. Wu Duantian immediately came to his senses and said angrily, Don't be so smug. You were lucky enough to dodge my first move. Don't even think about dodging my second move. As soon as he finished speaking, he held the dark golden saber with both hands. His entire body surged with golden light that soared into the sky. In an instant, he slashed out thousands of golden saber lights. Duanren border. Following his furious roar, thousands of golden saber lights danced like snowflakes, filling the night sky within 100 miles. Every blade light contained an incomparably fierce and sharp aura that seemed to be able to cut through all obstacles. Thousands of saber lights danced in the air, completely sealing off the night sky. Even if Ji Tianqing had heaven-defying means, it was impossible for him to escape the strangling of the saber light. All the tyrants' expressions changed abruptly. They hurriedly retreated dozens of miles away from the range of the golden saber net to avoid being affected. As for Ji Tianqing, he was still standing in the same spot with an indifferent expression. He had no intention of dodging or resisting. Only when the countless blades were about to land on his head did he raise his hands and form a profound incantation. Turbid Heaven Secret Art. Shwa. With a flash of white light, he disappeared on the spot. It was as if he had never existed. The overwhelming saber lights slashed down, but they all hit empty air, tearing countless void cracks in the night sky. At this moment, Ji Tianqing no longer existed in this world. All the tyrants present, regardless of whether they used their eyes or divine consciousness to search, could not find any trace of him. However, he was omnipresent. This was because he had become one with the heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth were him, and he was the heavens and the earth. Shwa shwa shwa. Thousands of golden saber lights danced in the night sky. They continued to strangle each other for 10 breaths of time, before gradually dissipating. Ji Tianqing's figure appeared again, and he was still unharmed. His robe was as white as snow, and his long hair was draped behind his head. There was not a single strand of hair that was messy. Wu Duantian stared at the night sky, dumbfounded. His eyes were filled with horror. In the night sky 100 miles away, Yuan Zhen, Qin Zheng, and the other tyrants were also filled with shock. They could only find it unbelievable. The crowd was silent for a moment before bursts of exclamations and discussions erupted. This is impossible. How could he have dodged this secret skill? Under the saber light, the night sky within 100 miles was torn apart. How could he have remained unharmed? This is too strange. How did he do it? Even if he used a sacred weapon, it would not be so strange. Ji Tianqing's skill is really unbelievable. 2 moves have already passed. I wonder if Alliance leader Wu's third move will be able to kill him? The crowd's discussions reverberated in the night sky. Wu Duantian's face was ghastly. His eyes were filled with fear and respect. In a trance, his thoughts returned to the rainy night more than 1,000 years ago. Back then, Kenshin had used such an unfathomable and unbelievable skill to easily dodge his ultimate attack. He would never forget what happened that night. Tonight, the scene from the past was happening again. His hands that were holding onto the saber could not help but tremble. His heart was filled with unyielding and grief. No, I will never let that happen again. Back then, I was weak. Now that I am half a step into the divine realm, I must avenge my past humiliation. Wu Duantian murmured to himself as he gripped his treasured saber tightly with both hands. His voice was as loud as a bell as he shouted, "Ji Tianqing, take this." As he spoke, his entire body ignited with a dark golden flame. A destructive aura surged out from him. He did not hesitate to use a forbidden secret skill and burn 50 years of cultivation to increase his strength by 3 times. At this moment, his body expanded to a height of more than 30 feet. He was like a giant shining with golden light. He held onto the saber with both hands and stared at Ji Tianqing. He roared at the top of his lungs, "Divine saber! Heaven-shattering!" Following his roar, he held onto the dark golden saber with both hands and slashed down with all his might. Suddenly, a giant golden saber that was thousands of feet long appeared. This giant golden saber light was even more dazzling than the sun. It lit up the night sky within a few hundred miles. The air in this area was also compressed by the saber light. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth was also absorbed by the saber light. Before the saber light descended, a terrifying suppressive force had sealed the area within a radius of 200 miles. Such a powerful saber could really destroy the heavens and the earth and cut everything in half. At this moment, everyone's hearts were in their throats. They could not take their eyes off the situation. Lu Baishuang, Jiao and the rest were sweating profusely for Ji Tianxing. They were extremely worried. Swoosh! The giant golden saber slashed down from the sky towards Ji Tianxing's head. The giant golden saber was about to hit Ji Tianxing and cut him in half. At this critical moment, strange ripples appeared in the night sky around him, folding in an intricate manner. With him as the center, the space within a radius of thousands of feet was completely messed up. Bam! The giant golden saber slashed down from the top of his head. However, it brushed past his shoulder and slashed into the ground below. Suddenly, a deep ravine that was dozens of miles long was formed on the flat plain. Chapter 2165. Wu Duantian roared this sentence subconsciously. Then he regretted it. His chest was filled with anger and humiliation, and the scene of that night appeared in his mind again. A strong sense of terror and fear emerged from the depths of his soul and rushed to the top of his head. His body stiffened on the spot, and his expression was extremely ugly. Such a familiar scene, and it's happening again. He muttered in a daze, and his eyes were filled with fear and self-mockery. That year, I exchanged 3 moves with him, and I couldn't even touch his clothes. But I was proud and arrogant, and thought that I missed. But reality proved that even if I attacked him 30 more times, or even 300 times, I couldn't hurt him at all. Tonight, this scene actually happened again. It's him. It's him. It's definitely him. Other than him, there's no other person in the world who can humiliate me in this way. In the beginning, Wu Duantian was still muttering in a daze. In the end, he couldn't help but roar out, and his voice was filled with respect and fear. Kenshin was a peak that he could never surpass in this lifetime. The night sky regained its clarity. The night sky around Ji Tianxing gradually returned to normal. He was still standing on the spot, unharmed, and his expression was calm and indifferent. No matter how strong Wu Duantian's aura was, or how terrifying his saber technique was, he didn't care. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even move half a step. In the eyes of others, it seemed that Wu Duantian really missed. After all, Ji Tianxing didn't even dodge, and the saber light brushed past him and hit the ground. But the martial saints present all understood that it wasn't Wu Duantian who missed. It was Ji Tianxing's technique that was too amazing. He could actually manipulate the power of space and cause the space around him to fold in disorder. It seemed that he didn't move from his spot, but in reality, the space was already in disorder. At that time he was actually in a different space, so how could he be hit? The night sky was dead silent. Everyone was silent, and no one could say a word. Everyone's face was filled with shock and horror. They looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of respect. After this incident, no matter how much he tried to deny it, he would not be able to change the fact that he was Kenshin's reincarnation. Everyone was incomparably certain that only the legendary sword god could execute such an unfathomable method. Outside the crowd, Great Emperor Chu Yin recovered from his shock. He clenched his fists in anger and cursed to himself. Damn bastard! He was actually this monstrous. Even Wu Duantian, a rank 9 martial sage, could not do anything to him. When can I take my revenge? In the crowd, Yuan Zhen's face was as cold as ice, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. I really didn't expect him to be the reincarnation of Kenshin, and be so powerful. Even Wu Duantian couldn't do anything to him. So it's even more impossible for me to kill him. It seems that this matter can only be discussed at length, and think of another way. Lu Baishuang, Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian collected their thoughts and wore joyful and excited expressions. Jiao and Tai Hao Yunqi could not help but clench their fists as their hearts finally settled down. At the same time, Ji Tianxing looked at Wu Duantian calmly and said in a firm voice, "Wu Duantian, the 3 moves have ended. The grudge between me and the Broken Sky Alliance has ended. I hope you can keep your promise. Otherwise, I don't mind destroying the Broken Sky Alliance. You're on your own now." He glanced coldly at Wu Duantian, and turned to fly towards Wangtian City. Wu Duantian stood in the night sky with a cold expression as he looked at Su Mo's departing figure. He pursed his lips tightly and did not say a word. Indeed, he had agreed to Ji Tianxing's suggestion in front of all the tyrants. Now that Ji Tianxing had taken 3 of his moves, he could not pursue the matter no matter what the outcome was. Otherwise, he would be a treacherous and untrustworthy person, and would be mocked by the various experts. Moreover, he had used 3 moves consecutively, and had not even managed to harm a single strand of Ji Tianxing's hair. This was humiliating enough. Damn it. I have been in seclusion for more than 200 years and finally broke through to the 9th level martial sage realm, and became a half-step divine realm expert. Below the 3 martial gods, I can be said to be the number 1. After coming out of seclusion, my name should be known throughout the continent, and I should be respected and worshipped by millions of martial artists. However, my reputation has been ruined by him, and I have become a laughingstock once again. Kenshin, oh Kenshin, what grudge do I have with you? Will I never be able to escape from your shadow in this lifetime? Wu Duantian thought to himself as his gaze turned cold, and his heart was filled with grief and despair. At this moment, Yuan Zhen brought Qin Zheng to his side and comforted him calmly. Alliance leader Wu, you don't have to blame yourself. You have already done your best. Even if you did not get justice for the Broken Sky Alliance, I believe that they will understand. After all, your opponent is the number 1 legendary figure in the world. Qin Zheng also smiled and comforted him. Alliance leader Wu, losing to Kenshin is not embarrassing. If he loses to you, he will lose face. Wu Duantian glanced at the 2 of them and nodded slightly. Thank you for your concern, Your Highness and Lord Qin. Yuan Zhen revealed a playful smile and secretly sent a message. Alliance leader Wu, tonight's matter ends here. You don't have to take it to heart. Next, let's enjoy the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Although Ji Tianxing is the reincarnation of Kenshin, he has just broken through to the martial sage realm. How can it be easy to return to the peak? There is still a long way to go. He has offended too many experts in the past. Whether he can return to his glory days, let's just wait and see. With that, Yuan Zhen turned and left with Qin Zheng. Wu Duantian was stunned for a moment, and immediately understood what Yuan Zhen meant. Instantly, a ray of light flashed across his eyes. What Your Highness means is... Unfortunately, Yuan Zhen had already turned and flew away. Halfway through his words, he could only swallow them back into his stomach. After admiring the battle that shocked the world, the tyrants all left with complicated feelings. Those veteran martial sages were immersed in the memory of Kenshin. Ji Tianxing's appearance had evoked their dusty memories. As for those younger generation martial sages, they were extremely wary of Ji Tianxing. Everyone was worried. After all, Ji Tianxing had come for the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Ji Tianxing returned to Sky City alone, and returned to the East Arrival Inn as if nothing had happened. Half of the people in Sky City had been awakened by the battle earlier. Countless martial artists walked on the streets and flew into the night sky, looking in the direction of strange Maple Garden. When Ji Tianxing returned to the East Arrival Inn, those martial artists were still discussing and making wild guesses. He did not care about anyone. After returning to his room, he entered the secret chamber to meditate. The voice of the burial of heaven immediately rang in his mind. Although you did not use me tonight, you have exposed Kenshin's identity. After tonight, this news will spread throughout the continent, and can no longer be concealed. Chapter 2166. Plans. What's there to plan? Ji Tianxing closed his eyes and meditated, using his spiritual sense to reply. Many people have seen my face back then. Now that I have appeared in front of the world, I will definitely be recognized. The Sword of Burial of Heaven, the Yellow Dragon Xie Wu Dao. These are all my flaws and will definitely arouse suspicion. Since the world will know my identity sooner or later, what difference does it make if it's a day earlier or a day later? Fortunately, I have returned to the martial sage realm. Other than the 3 martial gods, no one can do anything to me. Burial of Heaven was silent for a while before he said coldly, speaking of which, this is all Great Emperor Chu Yun's fault. If he had not pointed out your identity, you would still have a chance to cover it up. Ji Tianxing said indifferently, he's just a clown. Once the matter of the divine martial sacred assembly is over, he can die. Burial of Heaven quickly reminded him. Don't you think it's strange? He was locked up in the endless dark prison by martial god Taihao. How did he come out in just a few years? Don't you suspect that martial god Taihao might be playing tricks behind your back? If you kill great Emperor Chu Yun, how will martial god Taihao explain it to him? Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly. What explanation do I need to give him? Even if great Emperor Chu Yun came out early, it has nothing to do with him. I don't need to care about his face. Whether I give him face or not, it all depends on my mood. Burial of Heaven agreed and said emotionally. Sigh, if the three martial gods had to bow down to you in the past, they would not have dared to disobey you. Now that the world has changed, it is hard to predict people's hearts. Everything is unpredictable. Ji Tianqing was silent for a while before he said firmly. Tianju and I have never been on good terms. It is reasonable for him to deal with me. As for Taihao, we are on good terms but not very close. Even if he has hidden his motives, it is not strange that he has changed his attitude and even attacked me. As for Luo Shui, she is the only one I can trust. Even if 1,000 years have passed, I believe that her heart will not change. Hearing this, Burial of Heaven chuckled playfully. That's right. After all, your relationship isn't ordinary. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. He wanted to explain, but he held back. At this moment, the voice of a guard came from outside the door. Young Master, 7th Young Master and 9th Young Mistress request an audience. The young guard outside the door was an expert of the East arrival in, and knew the rules very well. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and muttered to himself. Just as we were talking about Taihao, his children came. Burial of Heaven advised. No matter what Taihao is like, Yunqi and Jiujiu are indeed two good children. They performed well tonight. You should meet them. Ji Tianqing nodded, got up, walked out of the secret room, and sat down in the living room. Then he said to the guard outside, let them in. As soon as he finished speaking, the door was opened by the guard. Taihao, Yunqi and Jiujiu entered the living room one after the other, and came before Ji Tianqing. Jiujiu looked at Ji Tianqing with concern and asked, Tianqing, are you all right? Did Wu Duantian hurt you? Even if they had not seen each other for many years, Jiujiu was still as innocent and cute as ever. Her clear eyes were filled with concern and worry, without any impurities. Ji Tianqing looked at her, and could not help but smile. He gently shook his head. I'm fine. He can't hurt me. That's good. Jiujiu heaved a sigh of relief, and smiled as if relieved of a heavy burden. I didn't expect you to become so powerful in just a few years. How good would it be if you didn't leave Mount God Sealing back then? Father misses you very much. Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Taihao Yunqi, little sister. Jiujiu turned to look at Taihao Yunqi. Seeing him shake his head slightly, she stopped talking. Taihao Yunqi looked at Ji Tianqing with a complicated expression, and cupped his hands in greeting. Young Master Ji, I wonder if I can still address you as such? Ji Tianqing glanced at him, and calmly said, Kenshin is long dead. The current me is just Ji Tianqing. Taihao Yunqi smiled and nodded. If that's the case, then Yunqi will put aside your past and boldly call you Young Master Ji. Ji Tianqing did not say much, and nodded in agreement. Taihao Yunqi withdrew his smile, and bowed deeply to him, and said in a solemn tone, Young Master Ji, I brought my little sister here tonight to apologize to you. Apologize? Ji Tianqing frowned slightly, and asked, When I was in danger, the two of you stepped forward and helped me. I can't thank you enough. What crime have you committed? Taihao Yunqi revealed a guilty expression, and truthfully said, In fact, we are apologizing to you on behalf of Father for what happened to great Emperor Chu Yun. When you left the vast divine kingdom, Father punished great Emperor Chu Yun by locking him in the boundless abyss for 100 years. However, at that time, the Chu Yun Empire was in chaos, facing collapse and disintegration, and its territories were annexed by several other empires. Even when my elder brother personally led the Divine Guards to suppress the situation, and supported the Crown Prince of the Chu Yun Empire to take over the imperial power, the chaos could not be resolved. A few years later, the chaos became more and more intense, and the various empires frequently went to war, which threatened the stability of the divine kingdom. At this critical juncture, all the royal relatives, nobles, and ministers of the Chu Yun Empire jointly wrote a letter to Father, asking him to pardon Great Emperor Chu Yun's sins. Only when Great Emperor Chu Yun returns to the throne can the chaos in the Chu Yun Empire be suppressed, and the balance of the various empires be maintained. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing understood what Taihao Yunqi meant. He nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "So after some consideration, your father decided to pardon Great Emperor Chu Yun, and allow him to return to the Chu Yun Empire to rectify the chaos." "That's right." Taihao Yunqi nodded and added, "However, before father pardoned Great Emperor Chu Yun, he had summoned him and severely reprimanded him. However, I did not expect Great Emperor Chu Yun to still bear a grudge after stabilizing the chaos in the Chu Yun Empire. When he found out that the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly was about to be held, and that you had broken through to the martial sage realm not long ago, he rushed here to add insult to injury. Young Master Ji, please do not worry. I have already sent a message to Father about what happened tonight. I believe Father will be furious and punish Great Emperor Chu Yun severely, and will not let him make the same mistake again." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked at Taihao Yunqi with burning eyes. "Are you pleading for him?" Taihao Yunqi was stunned and quickly shook his head. "Of course not. Great Emperor Chu Yun's character is despicable, and he deserves to be punished. I do not sympathize with him." Ji Tianqing nodded. "In that case, you do not need to let your father punish him. You just need to inform your father and ask him to promote a new Great Emperor Chu Yun." Chapter 2167. With Taihao Yunqi and Jiuzhou's intelligence, how could they not understand what Ji Tianqing was trying to say? The two of them immediately understood that Ji Tianqing did not intend to forgive Emperor Chu Yun. Furthermore, Emperor Chu Yun would not be able to return to Taihao Kingdom alive. Jiuzhou did not think too deeply into it. She only felt that it was better for a detestable scum like Emperor Chu Yun to die. However, Taihao Yunqi was highly regarded by martial god Taihao, and had been involved in the kingdom's political affairs. He was more thoughtful than Jiuzhou. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Young Master Ji, can't you be lenient? You should know that there are very few martial sages in the kingdom. There were only a handful of martial sages who were capable of taking on great responsibilities and ruling over an empire. It will be difficult to find a suitable successor in such a short time." Ji Tianqing also understood that Taihao Yunqi was not pleading for Emperor Chu Yun. He was just thinking about the stability of the kingdom. Therefore, he said in a calm tone, "Whether or not you can find a suitable successor is a problem for your father to consider. Allowing a scum like Emperor Chu Yun to take charge of an empire will cause more trouble sooner or later. If there is no one, it is not a bad choice for you to take charge of the Chu Yun Empire." "Ah." Taihao Yunqi was stunned. He said awkwardly, "Young Master Ji, I am afraid this is not appropriate. Although I am a martial sage, I am too young. In terms of experience, Big Brother is more suitable than me." Ji Tianqing frowned and said in a low voice, "When Emperor Chu Yun was sent to the boundless dark prison, your big brother led the divine guards to suppress him. However, he was unable to solve the chaos in the Chu Yun Empire. It is obvious that your big brother is not capable enough. You are the most suitable candidate. You don't have to say any more. I will send a message to your father and explain the situation to him personally." Seeing that Ji Tianqing had made up his mind, Taihao Yunqi could not persuade him anymore. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. After hesitating for a while, he cupped his fists and said to Ji Tianqing, "In that case, thank you for your recommendation." Originally, he was here to apologize and appease Ji Tianqing's anger. He wanted to save Great Emperor Chu Yun's life. But now that things had developed to this point, it became Ji Tianqing recommending him to be the Great Emperor of Chu Yun. This was too complicated. Jiuzhou, on the other hand, was overjoyed. She smiled and nodded in agreement. "Tianqing, you really have a good eye for people. Although Big Brother's strength is slightly stronger than Seventh Brother's, Big Brother is not as good as Seventh Brother when it comes to governing a country. If you personally recommend Seventh Brother to Father, Father will definitely seriously consider it. Ji Tianxing smiled gently at Jiu and didn't say anything. Jiu looked around and said worriedly, Tianxing, I'm afraid it's not safe for you to continue staying in this inn after such a big commotion tonight. It just so happens that seventh brother and I have a residence in the city. We brought many guards and set up a powerful defense. Why don't you come with us to stay in that residence and wait for the divine martial sacred assembly to begin? Jiu and Taihao Yunqi were of noble status and had brought many guards with them. Naturally, their safety was not a concern. If Ji Tianxing stayed with them, no one would dare to do anything to him. However, Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. Jiu, thank you for your kindness. I appreciate it. Jiu's little face revealed a disappointed expression. She pouted and said, All right, I know you don't want to cause trouble for us, but we really don't care. Since you insist, I won't force you. Taihao Yunqi also said in a serious tone, Young Master Ji, if you need our help with anything, just send us a message and it will be fine. You came to Sky Gazing City alone, and didn't bring any attendants or guards. We have a lot of people at your disposal. Ji Tianxing shook his head again and said, Thank you for your kindness, seventh son, but there's no need. Taihao Yunqi and Jiu chatted with him for a while more before they bowed and left. Not long after they left, Ji Tianxing was about to return to the secret chamber to meditate. At this time, the guard outside the door reported again. Young master, a lady with the surname Liu is here to visit. Surnamed Liu? Ji Tianxing blinked his eyes. His lips curled into a smile as he murmured, It must be her. The burial of heaven also added, Who asked you to owe so many love debts? Now the debt collector is here. I'm going to sleep. Don't look for me if there's nothing. After that, it fell into silence and no longer made any sound. Ji Tianxing could not help but roll his eyes. He muttered to himself, Love debts? How could there be such a thing? After a while, the door opened with a creak. Liu Baishuang, who was wearing an exquisite palace dress and a jeweled phoenix crown, was the first to step into the living room. Behind her were two young men with extraordinary bearings. They were Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian. The three of them stood in the middle of the living room and looked at Ji Tianxing. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian smiled as they cupped their fists towards Ji Tianxing. I'm Zhuo Mingqi. Greetings, young Master Ji. I'm Mu Changtian. I've heard so much about young Master Ji. I'm so lucky to finally meet you tonight. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, You're too polite. Please sit down and talk. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian sat down, but Liu Baishuang was still standing in the middle of the living room. She looked at Ji Tianxing with a complicated expression. Ji Tianxing looked at her and asked, What's wrong? It's only been a few months. Don't you recognize me? Liu Baishuang glared at him and said, You're the savior of the White Frost Empire, the heavenly imperial guardian of the heavenly empire. Who dares to not recognize you? Ji Tianxing pretended not to see her anger and asked, Then why are you staring at me? Did you find that I've become more handsome after a few months? Liu Baishuang couldn't help but roll her eyes and said, I was worried that you wouldn't be able to sleep well after provoking the Heaven End Alliance and the Heavenly Empire. Now that I see that you're still so carefree, I'm relieved. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian were stunned when they heard the strange conversation between the two. They looked at each other and felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. They couldn't help but smile. Ji Tianxing waved his hand disapprovingly and said confidently, It's just the Heaven End Alliance. What can they do to me? As for the Heavenly Empire, they won't dare to do anything to me unless they want to provoke a conflict between the two nations. Tell me, what do I have to fear? Liu Baishuang couldn't help but frown and said worriedly, Although that's the case, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to dodge a stab in the dark. I see that Yuan Zhen and Qin Zheng are hostile to you. They even want to borrow Wu Duantian's hand to kill you. The day after tomorrow is the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Yuan Zhen will be hosting the assembly. I'm worried that he will make a move on you and use some tricks. Young Master Ji, the three of us have discussed and decided that we shouldn't stay here for long. Chapter 2168. Lu Baishuang tried to persuade him. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian also tried to persuade Ji Tianqing to give up on the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly and leave Sky City as soon as possible. Once tonight was over, the news would spread the next day. Even if one were to think with their toes, they would know that there would be countless experts rushing over. Kenshin had led the world in the past and suppressed the three martial gods. In the process of his rise, he had offended many experts and forces. Back then, others did not dare to do anything to him because of his reputation and terrifying strength. However, it was different now as he had just become a martial sage. If the various experts and forces wanted to kill him, they would have a chance. However, after Lu Baishuang and the other two finished speaking, Ji Tianqing was still stubborn and insisted on staying. I appreciate your kind intentions, but I have a reason to stay. I know you have good intentions and are worried about my safety. However, you should know that I have already made preparations. Even Wu Duantian, a half-step to Divine Realm expert, could not do anything to me, let alone ordinary martial sages and forces. As for the three martial gods, they will not kill me personally. Hearing his words, Lu Baishuang, Zhuo Mingqi, and Mu Changtian fell silent. The three of them had to admit that Ji Tianqing's words made sense. Moreover, Wu Duantian could not hurt him at all. This was something that everyone had seen with their own eyes. After a moment of silence, Lu Baishuang said, "All right, since you insist on staying, we will not force you. However, I have a request. You cannot stay in this inn and must stay with us. Furthermore, I will also report everything that happened tonight to the Luotian Mountain, so that Lord Divine Master will be prepared." Ji Tianqing naturally understood what Lu Baishuang meant, but he pretended not to. He looked at Lu Baishuang in surprise and asked in disbelief, "Are you so anxious? I have not agreed to stay with you and you want to stay with me? Isn't this too casual? No, this is an important matter and I have to think about it carefully." Lu Baishuang was worried and anxious and did not react in time. He asked subconsciously, "Agree to what? What is there to think about? I'm doing this for your sake." Ji Tianqing immediately showed a touched expression and said earnestly, "Baishuang, I really didn't expect that your feelings for me would be so deep that you would even disregard your own reputation. It's a pity that I already have a wife and children. Even if you're with me, you won't have any status. Don't you feel wronged?" Lu Baishuang stared at him blankly for a moment, then came back to her senses, and her face turned red. "Ji Tianqing, you shameless bastard. What nonsense are you talking about? You heartless fellow, I don't care if you live or die." She glared fiercely at Ji Tianqing, then turned and left angrily. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian were still sitting in the living room with awkward and bitter smiles on their faces. The two of them looked at the calm Ji Tianqing, then looked at Lu Baishuang, who flicked her sleeves and left. They couldn't help but think to themselves, there was a rumor in the Divine Kingdom that Holy Emperor Baishuang and young Master Ji seemed to have developed feelings for each other, and that their relationship was not ordinary. Now it seems that it was true. Young Master Ji is the reincarnation of Kenshin. I didn't expect his personality to be so carefree and unrestrained. This is really unexpected. The two of them had heard that Kenshin was the best in the world. He was cold and arrogant and was obsessed with the way of the sword. He had never had any emotional entanglements with any woman. They didn't expect that Kenshin's reincarnation as Ji Tianqing would be so carefree. Wherever he went, he would be surrounded by women. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian looked at each other and muttered in their hearts. However, since Lu Baishuang had left, the two of them could not stay any longer and quickly got up to leave. "Young Master Ji, since you are not willing to stay with us in the Shanghai courtyard, we will not force you. We only hope that you will be careful when you are alone here. Don't fall into the trap of those scoundrels. Young Master Ji, please take care of yourself. We will meet again at the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly." Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian said their goodbyes to Ji Tianqing and left together. The living room quieted down. Ji Tianqing stood up calmly and returned to the secret chamber to continue meditating. Not long after he sat down, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind. "To be honest, Lu Baishuang treated you sincerely. It's just that her personality is a bit too straightforward. How could you tease her like that?" Those two brats were present. How awkward would it be for Lu Baishuang? Ji Tianqing frowned and said unhappily, "Didn't you go into hibernation? Why are you still secretly monitoring me?" The Burial of Heaven said in a serious tone, "This is not monitoring. I am thinking for your happiness. In your past life, you were all alone and only had feelings for one woman. However, you were unable to marry her. In this life, you cannot repeat the same mistake. You must marry a few more concubines to make up for your regrets. I think that Lu Baishuang is not bad. You should treat her seriously and take her in. Every time you tease her like this, aren't you just pushing her away?" Ji Tianqing couldn't help but roll his eyes and said seriously, "What kind of fallacy is this? In my past life, I was not able to spend time with Mingyue. In this life, I have to marry a few more concubines? What kind of compensation is this? This is clearly hurting her, okay? Besides, Lu Baishuang and I are innocent. There is no emotional entanglement. Don't try to matchmake us." The Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, "In any case, this is your problem. You can decide for yourself. Right, speaking of Mingyue, I just remembered something. The demon army has already retreated. That silly girl is still staying in the North Underworld Mountain as a spy. You should send her a message as soon as possible and let her leave the North Underworld Mountain." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Yes, the demon army has already retreated. A few demon saints have also almost died. In the short term, the demon army will definitely not cause any trouble. There is not much meaning for her to continue staying in the North Underworld Mountain. She should indeed come back early. However, I can't take the initiative to send her a message in case her identity is exposed. I can only wait for her to send me a message next month. I will then persuade her to come back." The Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment and asked again, "Right, you did not go with Jiu or Lu Baishuang. You insisted on staying in this inn. What do you want to do?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said with a burning gaze, "If I stay with them, it will be inconvenient for me to cultivate and break through. The Divine Martial Sacred Assembly will be held the day after tomorrow. Before that, I still have a lot of things to do. For example, break through to the second level of the Martial Saint realm." So fast. The Burial of Heaven was also shocked. His tone was full of disbelief. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "There are shackles in every big realm. It takes a lot of time and effort to break through. But I have already broken through to the Martial Saint realm. Breaking through to another small realm is as easy as flipping my hand." Chapter 2169. In a dimly lit secret room, Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on a white jade array platform, his eyes closed as he cultivated. His entire body was surrounded by a resplendent golden light, and his powerful aura caused the night sky to ripple. He was currently cultivating the 7th level of the Path of Sword Spirit. Once this level was cultivated to perfection, one could gather the power of heaven and earth, summon the divine power of the stars, and hide a sword in the void. He could already break through the void and travel through it. After successfully cultivating the path of the sword heart, one could reach the realm of no sword in hand, sword in heart. As for the path of sword spirit, one could reach the realm of no sword in heart, sword in heaven and earth. Everything in heaven and earth and the power of the stars could be transformed into his sword. With a single thought, he could control his sword to kill enemies from thousands of miles away. This was the power and effect of the path of sword spirit. There was no other sword technique in the world that was more profound and domineering than this. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly, an entire night had passed. It was daybreak, but Ji Tianqing was still immersed in his cultivation, working hard to break through to the second level of the martial sage realm. The seemingly peaceful sky-gazing city was actually filled with turbulent undercurrents. The events of the previous night seemed to have grown wings as they spread in all directions. There were many martial artists in Sky-Gazing City, and recently, the tyrants of the various divine kingdoms had gathered there. Naturally, the news spread very quickly. In just 1 or 2 days, the news had spread throughout the entire Shimu continent, and the powerhouses and powers of the various divine kingdoms knew about it. Invisibly, there were hundreds of powers and powerhouses secretly watching East Arrival Inn. Everyone knew that Qinshan Ji Tianxing was staying at East Arrival Inn. Since last night he had been staying in the inn, and had not come out even once. The owner and guards of East Arrival Inn could clearly feel that the atmosphere was not right. Since early morning, many people had poured into the inn, and most of them were experts and powerhouses. The remaining rooms in the inn had all been booked. Even if the price was twice as high as usual, the guests paid without hesitation. Those who didn't manage to book a room also stayed in the inn, and refused to leave. They either sat at a table for the entire day, or stayed at the entrance of the inn, and dozed off in the corner. There were also many martial artists who disguised themselves as peddlers, constantly entering and exiting the taverns to secretly inquire about the situation. The business of the East Arrival Inn had never been as prosperous as it was today. While the innkeeper was making a fortune, he couldn't help but feel worried and anxious. He had also heard the news and knew that there was a big shot staying in his inn. The various martial artists that flooded into the inn were all here for that big shot. He couldn't help but worry that if some forces or experts came to take revenge on that big shot, then his inn would be in danger. The innkeeper spent the whole day in nervousness and anxiety. Fortunately, the various martial artists still restrained themselves, and there were no conflicts. Everyone pretended as if nothing had happened and secretly stared at the movements upstairs. They did not communicate with each other. Until this night. When the lanterns were lit, a majestic aura of magical power suddenly erupted from a room on the 5th floor of the inn. A dazzling golden light soared into the sky from the room, illuminating the night sky for 100 miles. The sudden change alarmed half of the people in Wangtian City. Countless martial artists looked in the direction of the East Arrival Inn, discussing with complicated expressions. There were even many forces and experts who rushed to the East Arrival Inn as fast as lightning to check the situation. As for the hundreds of martial artists in the East Arrival Inn, they all revealed shocked and aghast expressions. After everyone came back to their senses, they all hid in places where there was no one and used various methods to spread the news. Before long, half of the people in Wangtian City knew one thing. That legendary big shot cultivated for a day and night in the East Arrival Inn, and actually broke through a realm. However, when the various experts rushed to the East Arrival Inn and secretly searched for traces of that person, they discovered that that person had mysteriously disappeared. Even the many experts and experts guarding the inn didn't know when that person had left. It was simply like a ghost appearing and disappearing. The night was pitch black. Ji Tianxing maintained a state of invisibility, restrained his aura, and sped through the night sky. In a short few dozen breaths, he passed through Wangtian City, and arrived at a mountain 800 miles south of the city. There was a town at the foot of the mountain, and dozens of palaces and residences were built on the peak of the mountain. The environment was very quiet and elegant. Even if it was late at night, those palaces and residences were still lit up with specks of light. Ji Tianxing silently flew to the peak of the mountain, and released an invisible divine sense, enveloping the entire mountain peak. The situation in the dozens of palaces and residences, even the slightest movement in the wind could not escape his detection. After a short few breaths, his divine sense locked onto a palace, and his figure flashed and arrived above this palace. The palace covered an area of 10,000 feet, and was a full 4 stories high. There was also an underground palace floor. This palace was called Hagyuan Palace. It was a temporary residence built by a martial arts force to entertain some special guests. Of course, outsiders could also live in it. It was just that one had to pay a jaw-dropping sky-high price, and had to have sufficient strength. The palace was protected by a sacred array, and there were also several guards at night, constantly patrolling the palace. The defense could be said to be tight. However, Ji Tianxing quietly landed in a corner of the palace. It only took him a few hundred breaths to break through the defensive array without alerting anyone. He passed through the gap in the array, and silently entered the palace. He walked to the top floor expressionlessly. Even if he walked through the corridors and stairs openly and walked past some guards, no one would notice him. At the same time, the light in the Heaven guest room on the top floor was on. In the dignified and elegant study, Great Emperor Chu Yun, who was wearing a golden dragon robe and a crown, was sitting at the desk. He held a jade slip in his left hand, and a cup of spiritual tea in his right hand. He was reading the news sent back by the spies, and his brows were tightly knitted together. In the corner behind him, the Grand Tutor in a black robe stood in the shadows, holding a black pen and a golden book with an indifferent expression. After reading the news, Great Emperor Chu Yun crushed the communication jade slip and said angrily, "Damn it! It's been a day, and the news has spread. Everyone in Wangtian City knows about what happened last night. Why hasn't anyone done anything? That useless Wu Duantian has given up. He doesn't even have the courage to take revenge. And that bastard Yuan Zhen, didn't he also want to kill Ji Tianxing? Why hasn't he done anything? Other than him, who else can kill Ji Tianxing?" The Grand Tutor in a black robe said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, it's not that Wu Duantian doesn't want to kill Ji Tianxing, but he can't. As for the other forces, they don't have the strength to deal with Ji Tianxing. Other than the three martial gods, I'm afraid no one can kill him. I'm afraid your plan of killing him with a borrowed knife won't work. Now that you've been exposed with Ji Tianxing's vengeful character, he'll definitely come after you." Chapter 2170. Even though Emperor Chu Yun was filled with resentment and unwillingness, the imperial advisor's words were reasonable. However, the imperial tutor's words were reasonable. After careful consideration, he could only follow his advice. Originally, I wanted to see him being besieged and killed with my own eyes. But now, it seems like my wish is going to be dashed. Imperial advisor, go pack up immediately. We're leaving. Ji Tianxing is cultivating in seclusion in the inn to prepare for the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. He won't have time to care about us. We have to rush back to the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly before it ends. Ji Tianxing won't chase us all the way to the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly for revenge, right? Your Majesty is wise. The imperial advisor could not help but smile when he saw that Emperor Chu Yun had finally relented. Even if Ji Tianxing chases you all the way to the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, he won't dare to kill you in public. After all, the Chuyan Empire can't do without your leadership. The Divine Martial Sacred Assembly won't allow him to kill you. Great Emperor Chu Yun revealed a smug look and nodded. Of course. Even if the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly doesn't like me, he has to protect my life in order to maintain the stability of the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Alright, go and get ready. We'll leave in 30 minutes. The imperial advisor did not say anything else. He cupped his hands and bowed, then went to pack up. Emperor Chu Yun put down his teacup and stretched his arms. He was about to leave. But at that moment, the door of the study suddenly opened with a creak. As the door opened, a gust of cold wind wrapped in a thick murderous aura rushed into the study from the outside. Emperor Chu Yun frowned and shouted angrily, "Which bastard is so blind? Do you want to die?" As he spoke, he turned to look at the door of the study. He originally thought that it was a reckless guard who accidentally opened the door to the study. But when he looked at the door, he realized that the situation was very strange. The imperial advisor had just walked to the door and stared at the night sky outside. His body was stiff, and he could not say a word. Emperor Chu Yun could only see his side profile, but he realized that his face was ashen and very embarrassed. At the same time, a mocking sneer came from outside the door. "You're only thinking of escaping now? Don't you think it's too late?" Great Emperor Chu Yun's body shook when he heard the voice. His expression changed on the spot. Ji Tianxing. He suddenly stood up and looked coldly at the door. He saw Ji Tianxing, who was dressed in a white robe, striding into the study with a sneer on his face. The imperial advisor was intimidated by his aura, and kept retreating until he reached the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire. Ji Tianxing walked into the study and stood 10 steps away from Great Emperor Chu Yun. He said coldly, "Great Emperor Chu Yun, we meet again after so many years." Great Emperor Chu Yun's expression was solemn. He looked at him sharply and said in a low voice, "Yes. You didn't expect this, did you? Back then, you caused this emperor to be imprisoned in the boundless black prison. And this emperor was released after a few short years. Do you want to know why?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and sneered. "No matter what the reason is, I don't want to know. You helped me so much last night, and I still haven't thanked you properly. That's why I'm here tonight to give you a big gift." How could Great Emperor Chu Yun not understand the meaning behind his words? He immediately shook his head and said, "Ji Tianqing, you and I are not friends. This emperor doesn't want your gift. If you come to me for revenge, then I have to warn you. The Chu Yun Empire can't do without me. Otherwise, the Chu Yun Empire will fall apart, and the vast divine kingdom will be in chaos. This is a situation that Divine Master Taihao doesn't want to see. Do you understand?" Ji Tianqing sneered and asked in a mocking tone, "You mean I can't kill you, or I'll offend martial god Taihao? It's good that you understand." Great Emperor Chu Yun raised his head, and his eyes flashed with pride and arrogance. He said confidently, "I'm sure you know that this emperor is the Divine Master's right-hand man. Although you were once the number one god's disciple of Mount Gods, you've now joined the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. Therefore, the Divine Master will never give up his right-hand man for an outsider. If you know what's good for you, then go back to Wangtian City obediently. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the wrath of Divine Master Taihao." Great Emperor Chu Yun knew that he was no match for Ji Tianqing, so he used martial god Taihao's name as a life-saving talisman. However, he didn't expect Ji Tianqing to laugh even more contemptuously after hearing his words. "Ha ha ha. Great Emperor Chu Yun, you really think too highly of yourself. You think too highly of yourself. No one can protect the person I want to kill. Even if martial god Taihao comes tonight, you'll still die." As soon as he finished speaking, a golden light surged out of Ji Tianqing's body and spread in all directions. A golden light shield with a radius of 10,000 feet appeared and enveloped the entire palace. This way, no matter what happened in the palace, even if the world was turned upside down, the outside world wouldn't know. Great Emperor Chu Yun saw that Ji Tianqing was about to attack and immediately shouted in shock and anger, "Ji Tianqing, you bastard, you're too arrogant. Even if Divine Master Taihao doesn't come personally, he's powerful and will know about this immediately. I advise you to stop, or Divine Master Taihao won't forgive you." The black-robed Grand Master also held the black brush and golden book tightly, and stood in front of Great Emperor Chu Yun. He said to Ji Tianqing, "Ji Tianqing, you were once the first god's disciple of Mount Gods and received Divine Master Taihao's favor and guidance. How can you do such a treacherous thing? Are you worthy of Divine Master Taihao's nurturing and guidance? Aren't you afraid that this matter will spread and you'll be reviled by the world?" Ji Tianqing glanced at him and sneered, "You're singing the same tune, using both kindness and authority. You're quite familiar with this game. Unfortunately, such petty tricks don't work on me. Great Emperor Chu Yun, I've already sent a message to martial god Taihao and asked him to appoint the seventh divine son as the new emperor of Chu Yun. You can give up now." "What?" Great Emperor Chu Yun's eyes widened in shock and horror. He had never expected Ji Tianqing to come up with such a drastic plan. His greatest reliance was the Chu Yun Empire, and his last life-saving charm was martial god Taihao. However, Ji Tianqing had already prepared for this. Recommending the seventh divine son as the new holy emperor of Chu Yun was equivalent to cutting off his escape route. "Bastard! You're so vicious." Great Emperor Chu Yun was so angry that he trembled and cursed. The black-robed Grand Master was also filled with anger. He roared in a hoarse voice, "Ji Tianqing, who do you think you are? Do you think you can influence the Divine Master's decision?" Ji Tianqing glanced at the two of them with pity and said indifferently, "You don't even know that you're about to die. How pitiful. All right, you don't have the chance to say your last words. It's time to go." After saying that, a black light flashed in his right hand, and the sword of burial of heaven appeared. Heaven-splitting sword. Chapter 2171. Swoosh. The 10-foot-long golden sword instantly shattered the study room, causing debris to fly everywhere. The great Emperor Chu Yun's expression changed drastically. He quickly took out a crimson sword and slashed out sword radiance. The black-robed Grand Tutor stood in front of him. He held the golden book in his left hand and waved a huge black brush in his right hand, shooting out a 7-colored light beam. Boom! A deafening muffled sound burst out. The seven-colored light beam was instantly shattered. The black-robed Grand Tutor was also sent flying. He spat out blood and crashed into the wall. The golden sword's power did not decrease at all. It destroyed the great Emperor Chu Yun's sword radiance and sent him flying as well. Boom. Immediately after, the golden sword struck the study room's floor with a loud bang. The entire palace was shattered into pieces by the giant sword. It swayed and collapsed into ruins. The violent shockwave spread out and turned the ruins into dust, scattering them into the night sky. In the blink of an eye, the entire Heguanyuan palace was reduced to dust. All that was left was a huge crater. However, the area around the crater was sealed by a golden light barrier with a radius of over 10,000 feet. The aftermath of the battle would not spread out, and would not affect the other palaces and residences. Cough cough. The great Emperor Chu Yun and the Grand Tutor flew out of the crater. Their faces were covered in blood as they coughed and were covered in dust. Both of them were in a sorry state. Their expressions were ferocious and vicious. Although they knew that Ji Tianxing's strength was terrifying, and that he could fight against Wu Duantian, they still had some hope. However, they still had a trace of hope in their hearts. They thought that if they joined forces, they would be able to block Ji Tianxing's attack. But now their fantasies and hopes had been shattered. The two of them simply could not believe that Ji Tianxing's strength was actually formidable to such an extent. With just one move, he had injured the two of them. They looked at each other and immediately communicated with their eyes to come up with a countermeasure. In the next moment, the black-robed Grand Tutor channeled all his power into the Golden Book. It released a huge shield to protect him and the great Emperor Chu Yun. At the same time, he waved the huge black brush with all his might, thrusting more than 30 black light blades at Ji Tianxing. Instead of attacking, great Emperor Chu Yun turned around and flew to the vicinity of the golden light shield. Holding his sword with both hands, he slashed down viciously. It turned out that he and the state preceptor had made up their minds to escape. They did not want to be entangled with Ji Tianxing. He attacked the golden light shield while the imperial advisor covered for him. The two of them cooperated very well. However, Ji Tianxing had come prepared, so how could he possibly allow them to escape? Boom! Great Emperor Chu Yun's sword struck the golden light shield, but it didn't break it. Instead, he was knocked back 10 steps. At this time, Ji Tianxing coldly shouted and waved his sword again, sending out a cold light. Piercing sword. The star-like cold light flashed in the night sky. In the next instant, before great Emperor Chu Yun could react, the cold light exploded in his chest and abdomen. Boom! With a deafening explosion, great Emperor Chu Yun's physical body collapsed on the spot, exploding into a rain of flesh and blood. The golden dragon robe he was wearing, as well as the sacred soft armor he was wearing, were also shattered by the explosion. Only a cluster of crimson god souls remained intact and flew out of the rain of blood. This scene shocked the state preceptor, and his soul almost left his body. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the defensive spell he cast would be completely ineffective against Ji Tianxing. Even though he blocked in front of great Emperor Chu Yun, the latter's physical body was still destroyed by the sword. Goddamn bastard, I'll fight you to the death. After coming back to his senses, the state preceptor roared hysterically. He waved his black brush and pounced at Ji Tianxing. In an instant, more than 60 fiery spear blades shot out. Swish, 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 swish. The fiery spear blades enveloped Ji Tianxing's figure. However, he was fearless. Golden light surged out of his left hand, and he raised his palm to slap the fiery spear blades. Heavenly Dragon Palm. A gigantic golden dragon claw slammed into the fiery spear blade, instantly shattering it into smithereens. The dragon claw's power did not diminish at all. It slammed into the state preceptor again, sending him flying. Blood spurted out of his 7 orifices as he crashed into the deep pit. On the other side, great Emperor Chu Yun's soul also entered the pit, trying to escape underground. A cold light flashed in Ji Tianxing's eyes. He waved his sword in his right hand. Soul Slayer. An illusory giant sword of black light instantly struck great Emperor Chu Yun's divine soul. Crack! His soul shattered on the spot. It was cut into 8 pieces and scattered powerlessly in the deep pit. A martial sage expert, great Emperor Chu Yun, had fallen just like that. The state preceptor lay in the deep pit covered in blood. After witnessing great Emperor Chu Yun's death with his own eyes, he was in complete despair. The anger in his heart turned into fear, and the battle intent that soared to the heavens also vanished into thin air. He watched as Ji Tianqing swung his sword again, and slashed down from the sky. He was instantly jolted awake and roared at the top of his lungs. Ji Tianqing, don't kill me. The person who murdered you was great Emperor Chu Yun, not me. I was only following his instructions. I had no choice. The state preceptor roared with tears and snot flowing down his face. He pleaded with Ji Tianqing for mercy. Please be magnanimous and spare my lowly life. As long as you don't kill me, I'm willing to do anything for you and pledge my life to you. Ji Tianqing came to the top of the deep pit and looked down at him from above. He said expressionlessly, "You're his accomplice. Naturally, you'll be punished as well. As for followers and guards, I don't need them. So I'm sorry." As soon as he finished speaking, the burial of heaven sword shone with a cold light and slashed down. Boom. With a loud sound, the state preceptor's physical body and soul shattered at the same time, turning into a dark red rain of blood that sprinkled into the deep pit. The burial of heaven sword emitted a black light, and swallowed the state preceptor and great Emperor Chu Yun's soul fragments. The night sky returned to calm. Ji Tianqing put away the burial of heaven sword, and disappeared into the night sky. He left quietly. The light shield that appeared out of nowhere naturally attracted the attention of many guards and cultivators. Dozens of guards and experts surrounded the light shield. They stuck their heads out and looked inside, secretly guessing what had happened. Unfortunately, their eyes and divine senses could not penetrate the light shield and see the situation inside. After a full 2 hours, the golden light shield naturally dissipated. Only then did everyone see the situation clearly. The originally resplendent Heguanyuan palace had disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and a huge crater. Even the people in Hagyuan Palace had disappeared without a trace. Such a strange scene made everyone's hearts jump, but they were also full of doubts. Not long after, this matter spread on the mountain peak. However, this matter only caused a small disturbance and did not cause any big waves. Countless cultivators' attention was focused on that big shot in Wangtian City. Of course, there was also the upcoming Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Hagyuan Palace was just a palace. The person who lived in it was not a famous big shot. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.